Right, I'll let you guys sit down. Is this the right order?
Yes.
I think, Thomas, you were going to sit here. Or,
Am I on that sofa?
No, this works.
Yeah.
Cool. Welcome, everyone, to the first of the panel talks here at the Games Academy Expo. My name's Lee Walton. I've got a few industry guests here we're going to talk to. So today we're going to talk about, this first talk, we're going to talk about tools and pipelines. I'm going to pick your brains on what you guys are up to. I'm going to let the guests introduce themselves from this point on. It's Daisy, Seb, and Thomas. So I'm going to grab a seat here, and we're going to let Daisy, if you just let us know what you're up to right now.
Yeah, so I'm a alumni programmer. I'm currently working for a company called Kilo. They are a maritime training solution, and I get to work on some fun software for training up people like the Navy on bridge training and rules and regulations. Yeah, I think that sums it up.
That's great.
Hi, my name's Sebastian. I'm an environment artist at Rocksteady, and I recently released Suicide Squad, so I guess that's pretty much me.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Apologies for saying Seb, but do you mind me calling you
No,
Seb?
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay,
Seb's
no
fine,
worries.
it's perfect.
Cool. Thomas?
I'm Thomas. I'm an associate motion capture technician. I put people in skin tight suits, cover them in balls, and make them dance for me. That's kind of my job.
Brilliant. And first question is to just, because I'm fairly new to the Games Academy, and you guys are all alumni of us, or where else have you
I
studied?
know, I graduated from UAL, University of Arts London.
Okay, and you guys are from here, from Falmouth?
Yeah.
Okay, so nice mixture. Welcome to, have you visited us before?
This is my first time, it's a really nice place.
Cool, that's
Really
great
nice.
to hear. So yeah, we're going to talk about tools. Sounds like you might be using sort of different tools in your different areas. So the main thing to ask is maybe first of all, because we've got students here, explain the differences between what you learned as a student here, the tools you used here versus what you're using now. Is there a small difference? Daisy, is there any differences?
So with the actual tools that I use, throughout university I use C# and Unity, and I still use that now, but I'm much more involved with the art pipeline because
Right.
the other developer I work with is a programmer and a 3D modeler. He's very senior, he's amazing, and he gives me lots of tips. But I get more involved with the optimization of the models and how to integrate them into the engine to have them work effectively with my programming, because I move a lot of things mechanically within VR through programming. So I have
Right.
to integrate that with the modeling, positioning, the topology, the texturing, and using light maps and things. So I get a lot more involved in that sense, and I've learned it in a deeper sense now.
Yeah, so you're very much part of the whole art pipeline, and you're involved in all of that. It sounds like.
Yeah,
Huge part of it.
I speak with my coworker a lot about the models that they make, and they say, like, do you need anything specifically for the mechanics that you're making within the simulator? So I get more involved, and I say, actually, like, this might better tweak like this, it will work better in VR with the physics, with the connection point of the hands, and just like really small details like that.
Okay, yeah, and you. So which game are you using?
Using Unity.
Unity, right.
Mm-hmm.
So you obviously had a bit of experience here using that. So that's really interesting that you're tweaking very small details about your pipeline all the time.
Yeah, it's a big focus on all the small details because everything that runs mainly runs off the Quest 3. So you're essentially trying to run a simulator off a mobile app.
Yeah.
So we focus a lot on doing a lot of the programming and the physics and lots of checks that would normally run on a local game. I actually do on a server because it's all multiplayer as well.
Right. That's really, so it's not very off the shelf, as it were.
Yeah, it's very niche,
customized.
very specific, and I think that's the nicest part about it is when you get to do something really niche.
Yeah, that's really cool. Sebastian, what about your experience of?
Yes, pretty much the same. Of course, it's like a bigger studio, so it's a lot more diluted, I guess, because you're more focused on what you do.
You've got a narrower range, perhaps,
Yeah, exactly,
in your
yeah.
studio.
But I think the same principles apply. You're still using the same softwares.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit more, niche. Like I use a lot more Substance Designer.
Right.
Softwares like that. But the entire process is the same, pretty much.
Yeah. Have you worked at other studios and seen a different pipeline, or is this your first?
I know this is my first studio.
Yeah. So you're learning. Would you say there was things that were, unique and bespoke at your studio compared to your studies? Is that?
Of course, like when you're studying, the process is a lot more different. So, for instance, you go from block out to finished piece, and you're in charge of like lighting, composition, all these kind of things. Whereas that is a lot more diverse. It's
Yeah.
like you have like level designers, you have lighting artists, and then
Okay.
there's different components in environment art that do
Yeah.
different things.
So you're in a smaller area because you've
section,
got a
yeah.
bigger team and you can all
It's-
specialize.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Sounds quite familiar.
Yeah, exactly,
To a
yeah.
bigger studio, take advantage of the numbers. Thomas, how's your experience compare to study pipelines versus industry pipeline?
I use almost nothing that I used at university.
Oh, okay.
'Cause, I work with an optical mocap system, so
Right,
they've
it's a-
got their own
it's
like
proprietary
software
system,
that needs
yeah.
to be used. Yeah, so I work with
Fantastic.
Vicon Shogun. We've done quite a lot of macro scripting in it.
Right.
So our pipeline that we run all of our data through has things that filter our data to make it smoother
Right.
and fill in any gaps kind of thing, so
it.
we don't have to do all that manually.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I use a lot of motion builder and Unreal stuff, getting like pre-visualization going and character retargeting onto different rigs. The only kind of thing that I use still now that I used at uni is motion builder, really.
Right.
But even that I don't use in the way I used at uni.
Okay.
So kind of nothing.
I mean, how did that go? Was that on the job training, or did you?
Yeah.
Did someone at the studio help you to learn these
Yeah,
things?
so my senior, he's completely taken the virtual production pipeline
Right.
sort of as his baby project, or
Right.
one of his baby projects.
Yeah.
He's sort of hammered out how to get our one-to-one data so that we can map our volume out, build a scene in Unreal, and it relates in the volume through streaming it into Motion Builder and then streaming Motion Builder into Unreal so
Yeah.
that we can have live like prop interaction stuff in
Okay.
Unreal.
So, the question for all of you then is kind of, so how often does this pipeline change? Is it quite a fixed thing where you are? It might vary by studios, but is it quite fixed where you are because it's a bigger?
Yeah, because the cycles of games are so long.
Yeah.
It's like, what, 3-5 years?
So it's stable for the cycle of a game.
Yeah, exactly.
perhaps?
Yeah, you kind of like figure out at the beginning, and then you cement it in that, and then
Yeah.
maybe you might tweak it in
Yeah.
between, but pretty much it stays the same throughout the process.
So for you guys in code kind of area, is it less stable? Are you tweaking that all the time? Or?
I would
Yeah,
say
thanks.
it's kind of developed a little bit over time as the project's gone along. I've focused on building up a pipeline document that
Right.
is company and client facing. So for a client that's interested in the software, they understand how it gets built, the process we go through, and for anybody new joining, they understand the focuses that they need to make when they're working on the software as well.
So your pipeline is like publicly available in a way, or is it just for clients, or is it? Public?
It's kind of for people who would be interested in purchasing
Yeah.
it. They go, well, how does this work? Well, are requesting a feature. We're going to pay money to get it
Yeah.
added in. How is this going to work? And they go, well, this is the pipeline. You know,
Yeah.
this is the process we go through. Are you happy with all of this? Is there anything that you would like to be done differently or something like that?
It's a good indicator of how important a pipeline is.
Yeah.
That you're literally selling that to people and talking about. We could use other words for pipeline, like just how we do things.
Yeah.
This is how we make stuff, right? This is our process. So we use that fancy pipeline word, but it's just like, so as a company, you're explaining that to your clients. That's really interesting. Thomas, does it change a lot for you? Sounds like you're a bit more.
No,
Tweaking, or-
actually it
It
doesn't.
doesn't?
Yeah, our pipeline is, but because I work across loads of different projects all at the same time,
Right.
we have to have a pipeline that really easily fits in with everyone. So we've got a really, really generic pipeline that
Okay.
works very well,
Yeah.
where we just kind of export an animation skeleton at the end of it, and then the animators do with that what they need.
Okay. Do you document that yourself, or is that
No,
No,
I'm
you're
only an
just-
associate. I'm not paid to do documentation.
you've got that
Yeah.
prepared for you? You've got
Yeah.
documentation. That's
All of the pipeline and everything that was already sort of pretty much sorted out by
Yeah.
the time that I joined the company.
Yeah, so they had a good system for training
Yeah.
you and learning that pipeline.
Yeah.
It's quite reassuring for people that might be like, hey, you're not using anything you learned. Well, don't worry, they teach you that on the job. They don't expect you to know custom pipelines, right? It would be unfair.
No, I got dropped into the deep end with that a little bit on the first week.
Of course, but you survived.
Yeah.
Good
yeah.
news. We're curious about what kind of tools, is it a combination of software? Sebastian, you're doing 3D environment.
3D
So
environments,
what software are you using for that? You said Substance.
So you use the
Suite,
Substance Suite pretty much, and then you use your whatever modeling package you prefer.
So you can use any 3D package. It's not.
Yeah, but you
fixed.
have to like export through 3ds Max. That's the main
Right.
thing. But
Okay.
everything else you can use pretty much at your own discretion.
Yeah.
Kind of like if you get the job done, that's
Yeah.
what you use. And of course within licensing as well.
Yeah.
Whatever they have license for, you use.
So your studio has multiple licenses that you can choose from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like
that's
for instance, some people prefer to like sculpt organic assets,
Yeah.
whereas I like to use Houdini to do those kind
Right.
of things. But again, it's like up to the artist's
That's
discretion.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you use Blender?
Yeah, I've recently switched to Blender.
I have to ask about Blender. It's a hot topic.
It's controversial.
Yeah. Is it controversial, Sebastian, in your studio or in general?
In my studio, yeah, because you always have the diehard like
Right.
Maya or 3ds Max fans.
Yeah.
But I mean, Blender is like one of those weird ones where it does everything.
Yeah.
And before it
that's
was
the
like
thing.
kind of like good at everything but not great, and now it's starting to reach that thing where it's like great at
It
everything.
is reaching a critical point then in the industry. We're hearing that a little bit because that's something we offer the same sort of system of a few different softwares at the university. Yeah, are you guys using Blender, Daisy? Any Blender stuff going on?
I use Blender occasionally myself to add little assets into the project. Like things I think that would add a little bit of flair to it. I'll go in and make that, spend a bit of time. But a lot of the extra tools and plugins and things that I use are like Unity assets from the Unity Asset Store. So because it's a network-based program, I use things like Fishnet and Dedicated Server Kit, and I use a lot of Meta's plugins for like creating compatibility with the Quest and the software that we're making.
Do you think, I mean, as you were explaining about client conversations about your pipeline with clients, do you think Blender would be if it's a sort of, it's sometimes seen as a bit of a negative if you're using an amateur software like that? Am I being harsh on Blender?
I don't think so. I think the main 3D modeling software that we use, that my coworker uses, is Autodesk. I believe it is Autodesk Maya.
Yeah.
But they use version 13 and they've never upgraded past that.
Oh, right.
Because,
That's really old. Yeah.
Yeah, because the models that we're creating inside of VR have to run, essentially, like I said, off of mobile applications. They have to be really highly optimized. So a lot of the advanced tools that comes with the latest software isn't needed, and it just overcomplicates things. So they keep it really, really simple in using older version of software, because of course the file exports are all going to be compatible with the same type, so there's no need for it.
There's a really interesting point if we wanted to talk about the future of tools and pipelines, like changing things. So using an old version of Maya is a good example of that's risky, right? Changing tools. I mean, it sounds great that you guys can choose. I mean, maybe the art team will have a lot more flexibility on that, and then a technical team, maybe, as you say, you've got documentation. It's a lot riskier to change things, perhaps, in the technical team.
There are a lot of things that like go along with changing the pipeline. If we were to change even just the axis that we export our skeletons out from, that would create like a decent amount more work on the other side of it for the animators, because that's then
there's a cascade of a bigger team is
300 odd animations a day that we get out, and then all of those would have to be reoriented, which isn't a hugely time-consuming process on its own, but when you have to do it 300 times, it's a lot of wasted time.
Yeah, I mean, Sebastian, you picked up, I know 20 years ago we did the same thing where you have a pipeline planned for a project, and you guys are sort of fixing a pipeline per project. So is there a period where you investigate new tools in a project?
Yeah, that was before I joined though. But yeah, you have like an R&D sort of period. Where like the artist, normally it'll be like a principal artist or like the expert artist will like try and find out, or the team in general, will try to find out what's the best solution for these problems. Whether it's like destructible assets, like what's the best pipeline for that. How different techniques or different technologies interact, I don't know. Like for instance with Unreal, with the new Unreal 5, there's loads of different questions you have to answer for that. But yeah, stuff like that.
So who's the ultimate decision? I mean, is it an art-driven decision, whatever looks best, or is it a efficiency decision? Is it a cost decision? Is it all of those? It's quite complicated.
Yeah, there's many different facets. So sometimes it will normally start off with like, let's go for like the best quality possible. And then tech artists or will just come in and try to optimize it as much as possible, or be like, we can't do this in order to achieve a certain FPS or a certain fidelity that we're going for, or like we can't do this. Yeah, pretty much.
You mentioned tech artists. We should come on. That's a really big area of work. I mean, they're not easy to find. But Daisy, your client-facing, is that something you would? Do clients request changes to your pipeline ever? That's a curious thought.
I wouldn't say they request changes, but they can sometimes be really particular about the type of feature they want added.
Yeah.
I don't talk to clients very often.
No, okay.
I'll have maybe a bi-weekly meeting with them there to explain kind of the things that have gone on in the project over the last couple sprints and stuff, to give them updates about and a little bit of technical insight. But majority of the requests are handled by other employees in the company who are more client-facing. I'm kind of left to sit in my corner and code.
It makes sense, but I mean that's a big clue that maybe everybody's involved in pipelines in some way. Even salespeople right at the end talking to a client. In your business, sounds like everybody's involved in planning the pipeline.
I'll talk to. The only person I talk to super consistently is my other developer, who's a 3D modeler and a programmer like myself, and my boss, who's client-facing and kind of handles sales and things. But I will speak to like the 8 other people in the company very on and off when they have specific needs and requirements, and say, "Oh, hey, do you want to collaborate on this post that we're posting on social media and things like that?" And I'll send over content. So I get to work with a lot of different people and like put different hats on, which is fun.
That sounds good. Yeah, so you really are sharing some of the technical details that you do. I mean, if we compare sort of previous industry practices, we're quite protected. A pipeline that works better than another team's pipeline would be under NDA and protected. So it's really, I mean, Sebastian, is your pipeline protected in that way? You can't really talk to us about it too much, or?
And of course, like you have like the in-house tools that they built specifically for the project, which I kind of can and can't, I guess, because you can talk about the softwares they use. Like they use a lot of Houdini and procedurally based tools in order to build like these vast cities that you explore. Right. But it's still like the fundamental same process that you go through.
Because they're not custom made just for you. So that was 20 years ago in my time, we had custom game engines, custom tools. So artists would drive that to request what they want, and obviously we wouldn't be able to share those. You can't take those to another studio. But you guys are using things that we recognize, Houdini and different 3D software. So we know those names, and for students, it's good to hear they could practice those tools, that you guys use in a studio. But the sort of recipe is different in each studio, but you're using ingredients that we would be familiar with. Is that fair to say? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really interesting for the guys here. What is the future for? I mean, Thomas, what do you think would be the future in where you're working?
For mocap or for my studio?
Yeah, let's go with what your studio. I mean, we don't want to share any secrets from your studio, but do you know of them planning to change to a new technology that we've not heard of, or?
So kind of mocap breaks down into 3 main sort of technology branches. We've got optical mocap, which is what I do, which is the kind of ping pong ball suits that you see in behind the scenes. You've got inertial tracker based suits, which are like Xsense Rococo. They work off having little boxes on you and transmit rotational data for everywhere they are. And then the kind of newer one that's still sort of definitely on the bottom for quality is markerless optical, which is just a couple of phone cameras, and then it uses some AI learning to map you as an animatable character.
We got the magical AI mentioned there. So
it's called Move AI. It's not AI animation, and it's not AI development. It just uses the AI to know where you are.
Yeah. So it's creeping in there as part of a workflow, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think for this discussion with tools, for me, AI, you're probably that's creeping in for all of you, perhaps, is it, in some ways? But is there any AI tools coming in on your team at all?
Well, it's kind of weird because obviously you have like the legal side of it.
Yeah.
So you can't just go out and use.
Is the studio incredibly wary of doing that in that sense?
Well, yeah, because like with AI tools, there's like like you have the base that it builds from.
Yeah.
And that base, depending on where it's from,
Yes.
could be copyrighted or not.
Yeah.
But in general, we don't use AI.
No, it is certainly a
least for
copyright
creative.
issue that you guys have to produce all your content yourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We have to produce
Yeah.
everything.
So that's a risky thing. I mean, in tech, it's a little bit. I mean, it's guiding things you would normally do. So, Daisy, is there any AI tools coming into your workflow? The dreaded AI.
I wouldn't say there's specifically AI tools that
Yeah.
are being used because, but there is. We do want to add AI into our system because ships currently in the training simulator, other ships, non-player character ships, are controlled manually. Their routes are mapped manually,
Right.
and if they were able to diverge their own route, it would obviously be much more efficient. It would be less work
Yes.
for an instructor
Yes.
using the software. So not using machine learning
No.
AI, not these tools like OpenAI and things, but
Yes.
using AI that's been around for decades, like
Yes.
the Ghosts in Pac-Man and things like that, and the NPC that runs around in Skyrim, that type of AI, creating it myself
That's
and
a
then
very-
adding it into the
That's a
program.
very good point about just a smart NPC. You know, that's gaming technology that has crossed over into other businesses because that's incredibly useful. And you're right, it's been around a long time.
Yeah.
It's very basic AI.
Yes.
Because I think that would be the argument that there are tools out there that do things for us, whether they're they're artificial things that do stuff for us. I'm trying to think of any other future things you're changing in your pipeline. Have you got any news for us on your?
From me?
Yeah.
So something really interesting that's happening recently in the VR space is Meta recently made a release of new open standards. So
Right.
their operating system is going to be able to be run on any VR hardware. So Republic of
Right.
Gaming and Lenovo just announced 2 headsets that are going to run Horizon OS, which is what Meta are calling the new operating system,
Okay.
which means that for developers like myself, it just hardware became much more free to use. The software that I'm making is going to be able to run on basically any hardware available to me in the future. And the thing that's just out of reach right now is hand tracking.
Right.
So to not have to hold controllers, but something that actually wraps around your hand a bit more is going to be a lot more immersive, especially for training situations.
Yes.
The reason it's not very useful right now is because you don't have any sort of response to the things you're touching. There's no haptics or anything. That's why controllers are prevalent in my situations, because when you're pushing a lever and pulling the throttle, you have that fake resistance in
There's
the controller.
actually something in your hand
Yeah.
rather than space. Air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the future, there's loads of companies are now going to have the ability to create hardware and run operating system that is so far ahead from other operating systems available on VR, and it's going to be all under the same roof, the same store. Apps are going to be cross-compatible to different devices, just like a laptop running Windows for the Windows App Store and things like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be really useful.
Except for Apple.
Except Apple.
Which won't be doing
They
that.
will always be on their own, in their own
always
little
be on their
space.
own. Yeah, it just popped into my head that you got the Vision Pro with hand tracking that's very robust.
They're the occlusion culling around the hands, the algorithms for that are much more advanced than anything else we've seen.
So any interest from your company in Apple Vision Pro? Or?
Probably not.
It's
no.
really an outlier, isn't it?
It is. It's very specific
Yeah.
and very orientated to developers. I
Yeah.
think that want to use it to build, particularly artists. I've seen 3D modeling software be compatible with these headsets, and another one that's being released by Sony, but it's only been announced in Japan, is that they're going to be compatible with creating your own models inside of VR, which is connected up to your computer. Really cool stuff.
There's a really interesting point. I mean, do you think you'll ever be modeling in VR? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Maya launched in the 90s, because it started in 1998, believe it or not. So,
Mine's older than me.
Yeah, Maya is older than you, Thomas, and we still use it, and it has not changed. As you say, you can use older versions. So why are we still using it in 2024? Why are we 3ds Max began in that predates Windows, by the way, Max. It's a DOS program. So we're using these 1980s and 1990s technology. And in environment art, do you think there's newer tools, not Blender, that you would be using especially? I mean, I'm really curious if people are going to be modeling in VR. Do you think that will happen?
I think for one, the reason why they use the older software is because it's kind of safe. Like these studios have built these plugins and like these tools for these softwares, and they know that's another reason why they don't update them. Is because they know it works. It won't break if they go into the next project. It's like already a foundation that we have.
It's business, isn't it? You've got to be stable.
And it's all about speed as well. Like, for instance, you don't have weeks and weeks and weeks to work on stuff. You have more like half a day or a day to do certain tasks. But in regards to VR, I've never tried it. I know concept artists like to use it a lot. Mainly because it's quite freeing, and you have to work in like quite a 3D visual space. But for environment, I don't think so.
No. But
maybe in the future.
I've done a bit of modelling in Gravity Sketch. If you want to try that, I recommend it. It's really good. In the sense that it's quite mind-boggling that you're always looking at things on a two-dimensional screen normally when you're modelling, but you're making a 3D thing. So I'm just curious when that breakthrough is going to happen, that we're just finally seeing things 3D, because we're making 3D games. But I guess it depends on the target platform. The consumer is still playing their games in 2D. So until that becomes norm, we won't need to do it, perhaps. But what do you think, this is slightly different to VR, but...
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, in my mind, if you've worked in a 3D package, then you've worked in every 3D package, and it's just kind of finding the one that has the best tools in it for what you need to do. Whether that's Maya, 3ds Max, Blender, whatever you're comfortable with working in, that you can give in the right file format to whoever you need to give it to. I don't really care what you work in.
Yeah, I think just to say from my experience, I've found that students that don't do 3D have no experience at all of any 3D packages. They really take to 3D modeling in VR. It's so naturalistic. I've seen that happen where people have been very struggling with the concept of Maya or Max, but you show them VR modeling and they take to it straight away. It's a bit like a touch screen versus a mouse. It's just more intuitive. So maybe one day you'll be working with youngsters that come in and show you, I want to do it in VR. It could happen, right? It could be fun. I think Apple is an outlier, as you say, and AR could be the future. I mean, what you do, motion capture, is kind of AR, isn't it? It's augmenting, it's copying. It's similar to AR tech, isn't it? It's mixing. If you think about it.
Yes and no.
Right.
If I'm doing like real-time data streaming into Unreal, then you could kind of argue that that's AR.
So what's the future of your industry then, Tom? Is it the lack of professional? You're going to have a much reduced cost of equipment, aren't you? Surely that's the future, or is it not happening yet?
So my setup is 48 Vicon cameras at the moment.
Right.
Each one of those is £19,500. So there's a lot of cost that goes into a setup for an optical studio, which is where the big benefits towards having an inertial based system go, because you're then trading off data quality for price, essentially.
Exactly. So the cost could be, the future of that industry could be cost coming down, maybe? Or do you feel it would be stable?
So. I mean, the money in mocap is just ridiculous. You look at the numbers and they don't look real.
Okay. Good business to get into, guys.
Yeah.
Sell that mocap stuff. So
yeah, seriously. Yeah. If you're ever having to work with mocap, be prepared for a massive bill, like way bigger than you expect.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, an average data cost for just body only data, one person is £8 per second of data. And you're looking at getting a couple hundred animations out and maybe about 180 character seconds from a couple of days of shoot.
Wow.
So that's already...
But here's a question, maybe a few of you can relate, that in the past we've seen this scare of jobs being lost. Now mocap surely was the scare that, we won't need animators anymore. And that's not true, is it?
Yeah, no, there is quite a big thing still.
Is it still a worry for some people?
Yeah, animators won't sort of openly say it, but it's quite obvious when they've got a bit of animosity towards us for what we do. I was trained as an animator. I can't animate. It's just as an aside, really bad. It's quite funny. But yeah, we're an animation tool. Yeah, we're there to sort of do the 900 locomotion animations that you don't want to do, so that you've got a lot more time to do the really cool flair stuff and add the creative part in.
The human part is where
we take a lot of the laborious bullshit work away.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, it's cool. So, so the point is, it works hand in hand with animation, and you know, the fear. I remember the worry that would eliminate it.
We've had a lot of sort of scalability on the stuff we can do, so we can do like massive amounts of wire work to get really cool like death animations or like hero poses as they're doing things. We can do matched combat, which is full speed, full weight fight performance. Okay. So we'll have people with like shields and swords just smacking the hell out of each other.
And that's something that's just never going to be easy for traditional animation, is it?
No, I mean, we can do like a full character set combat stuff in a few days to what would take an animator a month to do.
So you'd be saying that you're complementing animators?
Massively so, yeah. We're the whole purpose of motion capture is to cut down animation time. Yeah,
and that's the purpose for tools, right? I mean, all the tools you guys are using is to complement each other. That's, you know, and to get a team working together. Sebastian, what about the fear of like procedurally generated stuff? It sounds like you're working on those kind of tools.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Is some of that like scanning, you know, there's a lot of fear of, I mean, I was a car modeler for a while, and nowadays you just scan it, right? Well, no. But I mean, is there any change in sort of personnel in that area, technology eliminating jobs, you know?
I think so, but it's one of those things where like when a new technique comes in, usually that means that allows more freedom for something else. That's where you get the innovation coming in.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And like, for instance, with scans, someone still has to clean up those scans. Yeah. And that means you have to learn a new skill, a new pipeline, for instance, or a new tool to like clean up those scans. So again, there's another, like you lose one job maybe, but it adds another. And I mean, with games especially, like the industry constantly evolves. Yeah. Like you have to stay up to date.
That's a good point. You're probably adding jobs because there's more steps for a better result.
Yeah, exactly. And there's certain things you can't capture. Yeah. Like you can scan a rock, but you can't scan like museums, for instance, or certain like sci-fi elements. You can't scan those things in. So
not if they don't exist, you can't scan it, can you?
Exactly.
We need people like us to invent this stuff. So yeah, we just have. If we were just scanning, we'd have to scan sofas like this. It'd be really boring, wouldn't it? So yeah, good points. Is there any Daisy? Is there any changes in your business that might affect jobs or add jobs or something? I mean, it sounds like you know you're quite a specific business that has is that expanding in any way?
It is very, very niche. I think some of the tools that will be created will just free up time for my coworker who's a 3D modeler. So there's something we call a depth mesh in the sea, which is just the seabed, and we use maps of the sea with all the heights and everything, and my coworker has to go and manually add vertices to where the seafloor is, so that we'll know when a ship is running aground or something.
That's quite a serious,
but you need that to be very specific. You're going to always have to manually do that closer to where boats are going to more commonly run aground.
It's a safety issue that someone is taking control of that.
But in more open areas, having those procedurally generated to be pseudo-random would be a great use of freeing up someone's time doing that. So it's not going to remove someone's job, it's just going to free up time for them to focus somewhere else.
I've got a final question for all of you. So do you enjoy that part, the pipeline design, the tool? Is that fun, tweaking all these? Is that a fun thing that you do in your work?
Yeah. I think it is fun because you're adapting, because you're learning something new or a new technology is released, and at the end of the day, it's really exciting.
So that's a big thing to realise that you're still learning, right? You graduate, you do a job, but you're always learning
every single day. Especially going from games into like a completely different industry like maritime. Like I get my ear talked off about boats all the time, but it's still really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds great. You enjoying the pipeline, Sebastian? Like any parts of that fun to actually use all these different tools and different...
I mean, especially the first time you learn it. it's insanely fun. Like you realize it opens up so many different avenues, and your brain starts thinking, how else can I approach these different situations or scenarios that I may be in? But yeah, the core principles, stay the same. Pretty much.
Thomas, is it fun for you I mean, you mentioned that you had quite a fixed pipeline where you are with documentation.
I mean, one thing I haven't really spoken about is my facial pipeline, which I've been hammering out a lot the past couple of months.
That's your own project, is it?
Yeah, for one of the projects that my company's working on, we're having to sort of really push into facial animation.
Right.
So I've been working with the senior principal animator, I think, on that project to get that facial pipeline in.
You're enjoying that?
Photogrammetry, I had to do pipeline stuff with my senior for that while we were getting set up to do a different project's load of work. But yeah, setting up those pipelines was a lot of failing, but it was really fun failing to see where things work and where they don't.
I'm glad you said that. It's a really good thing to say, that the failure is the fun.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize that was my favorite thing about the games industry, was the experimentation and the failure. There are many industries where you're not allowed to do that. You know, if you're designing a Boeing aircraft, they're in a bit of trouble at the moment for a few software failures that kill people. So games, it's going to die, and you can fail a lot, can't you?
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. The failure. It's great to hear you use the two words together, like failure and fun.
Yeah.
And it's really good to hear from you, Thomas, about that. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things to go into, especially a slightly more technical role, is to find a way to enjoy everything breaking and exploding on you. Because it is just, I mean, it's not anything negative about your work or the way you do it. It's just a new thing to explore and learn from.
Because you're working in the cutting edge of tools, really. It's exciting. So of course it will fail. Yeah, you're going to find out. Okay. We're actually nearly out. We're about out of time there. So that was a great summary. Well done, Thomas. Failure is fun. Yeah, that's a really good summary of tools. But it's great to hear different tools. But at the end of the day, how important they are. And I'm really glad to hear you're enjoying that. There's new things to learn. I'm really glad to hear you enjoying that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. We're going to wrap up there. That's it. Thanks for joining us.
On the sitting one.
There we go. All right, welcome everybody to this panel on collaborative game dev, bridging disciplines. Going to start out by just introducing each of our guests here, all of whom are GA grads from really, I think, across the scope of that 10 years that we're celebrating this year with our 10-year anniversary. So if we can go maybe right to left along the line of our industry guests here, and if you could all say a little bit about what your current role is, what you're working on, and also when you graduated from the GA, that would be awesome.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cassie Cornish. I'm a junior game designer at Ballistic Moon, currently working on the remaster of Until Dawn, and I graduated last year, so I was in the EXPO shoes just a year ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. My name is Robin Arthur Greenwood. I'm a junior concept artist at Ubisoft, working on an unannounced new IP. I graduated in 2018 from the game development course on the art route. I'll pass it over.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Elise Dennis. I graduated 2 years ago. I work for Behaviour UK South, based in True, very local. And I'm working on an unannounced game also. You may know it's like things like Dead by Daylight, etc. Yeah, it's been good hearing it. I like on a panel with a bunch of alum.
Great.
Oh my God. My name is Rebecca Haig. I'm a scriptwriter at Playground Games working on Fable. I've been there for about 5 years. Like Robin, I graduated in 2018, so it's been a hot minute.
My name's Tom Coveney. I'm currently working at Rocksteady Studios, making the Suicide Squad and a couple of unannounced projects. And I was one of on the first cohort through the games course, so I graduated in 2017. So
older than me.
The senior.
It certainly wasn't an event like this back then, was it?
No, there was not.
Yes.
No, we showed some videos in Farmer Cinema.
Yes,
we got the cinema experience.
Yeah.
All right, thanks very much, everybody. So our panel today is about collaborative game dev and bridging across our disciplines. So I'd like to kick off by talking a little bit about those disciplines. I think we've got a really interesting range of different roles and disciplines represented today in the panel. So our first question is around your role. So what you guys tend to prioritize more compared to people in other roles. We've got some designers, we've got writers, we've got some artists. So it would be really cool to go perhaps again right to left along our lineup here and talk a little bit about that role that you do, your specialism.
Okay. So as I said, I'm a designer working on Until Dawn Remaster, and it isn't just a case of, unfortunately, going in editor and pressing HD on all the textures, sadly. We've converted the game from Decima Engine to Unreal, so there was a lot of work going into unplugging everything, plugging it all back in again, translating it between things. And a lot of my work is, I've worked on a few things, the interactions, cameras, QTEs at the moment. And I suppose compared to other disciplines, we kind of have to know the game inside out. Someone could send a screenshot and go, does anyone know what this is from? And I will probably know the exact cutscene it's from. Design is often treated a bit like an in-between of some disciplines. And as such, you do know the kind of overall game. Some people say that design is a bit like the glue between other disciplines sometimes, but even though it isn't that on paper, you kind of end up becoming that as well, just from having to know things inside and out. So, we're a bit like the wiki page for our game and team sometimes.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that leads really nicely into concept, because I hear what you say about being like a glue between teams, because concept, something that I've found working at Ubisoft is treating the team almost like a service team, and so I end up working a lot for other teams and sort of bridging between different art disciplines, narrative and design. Something that's unique, obviously, to concept art is we're creating a lot of the initial visuals that go into different disciplines. We are often given briefs. Pretty much everything we do is a brief, either from art direction or from narrative, design, or character, and that's something we then visualize. And that can come in any form, all the way from sort of character posing, iteration of animation, all the way through to key art, high key, sort of visual stuff. But yeah, my role specifically, I've mostly focused on character concept art. So a lot of my stuff, I predominantly work with character art and animation, and narrative as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I find myself at the moment. How about you?
Yeah, that really leads on well to my role. So just for clarification again, I'm a level designer, and we have this sort of weird in-between of being at the end of the product and the start of the product and ever in between. Sometimes we can come at the very end of a project and we are just literally adding to what already exists. And sometimes we have to start from absolute paper and absolute nothing. And the interesting thing about being a level designer is obviously we create the playable space, but not only for the players, but also for the other devs to kind of realize our ideas. And it's mainly about ideation, which leads into your role with concepts. And a lot of my day is looking at concept art, taking it, and then making the very first visualization of what that's going to be in the game. So the main thing with that, in terms of working with other developers, is ensuring it's communicated well and it comes across really closely with the intent of what we want with that space. So that's not just making it out of cubes, it's also adding little bits to give it a good sense of feeling, atmosphere, and then also adding notes of what do we think could be here, what do we think should be here, and what's very important for gameplay moments, not only for the player, but also for narrative, and just keeping that sort of consistency going. And then sometimes we do the first ideation, it doesn't really go too well, and we need to go back to concept. So we'll go into communication with concept artists, directors, narrative, anyone really, and we'll get those ideas brewing in the ideation. We'll work with game designers to into a cohesive package and deliver it with the first playable level. And then that process keeps going on, reiterating, and it keeps getting refined until the game's shippable and it's launched, essentially.
Yeah, really interesting. And I guess speaking of narrative, it brings you on.
Hello. It's funny that I knew that as soon as someone mentioned my discipline is the glue, that there were going to be at least three of us that were going to be we're the glue, narrative's the glue. But you end up collaborating massively with all of the other disciplines. That's how you spend most of your time. A huge amount of your time is spent in meetings. We game developers love meetings because you're never really working on something on your own. You're constantly working either in your own discipline, which tends to be in a team. You're rarely the only one on your own, or it's in multidiscipline, like strike teams that are working on something. Communication is absolutely key. I spend most of my day either in Excel, Microsoft Teams, or in meetings. All I can think of is Microsoft Excel. All I've been doing is Microsoft Excel all year. But one of the most important things that we do, as was discussed over here, like we work really closely with these guys. And it completely depends on the project where Narrative's place is within that kind of like hierarchy or ecosystem. If it's a narrative-led project, then we are sending out briefs to other disciplines. We are setting the documentation, setting the world lore, the lore Bible. Or if it's not a narrative-led, which was something that I've previously worked on, it's reactive. You are filling in gaps. You are literally the glue plugging like design systems together and making things make sense. There is a preference. It's the first one.
Yeah, so I mean, at least already touched on what we do as level designers. We're kind of responsible for the sort of bucket that everything else gets poured into a lot of the time. Although also it's another role that can change a lot based on the project and the style of game you're making. But in the games that I've been responsible for, everything's kind of coming together and being stitched together in the level. Like that's the context in which you experience all the other kind of elements. So you obviously have to collaborate with all the other disciplines whose elements you are using. But the bit that we tend to be mindful of uniquely is trying to preserve that initial design intent of the space, because it's quite easy for things to get muddied or for the player to get pulled in a lot of different directions. Like the more bells and whistles and pretty things you add in, if they're not pulling together in the right directions, then it can be a distraction, kind of end up as just noise, right? So it's kind of, you tend to be the one who has the oversight over how all those things are fitting together, and trying to preserve what you initially wanted the player to go over there instead of getting distracted by loud noises from the audio team.
Perfect example.
Or kind of, keeping that kind of initial vision true.
That concept of noise, or the sort of everybody's best efforts going into a blender and not cohering well, is really interesting, and I definitely want to come back to that idea later on. I actually think, Rebecca, you said something interesting about Excel, because I think a lot of people's idea of what being a game writer isn't that. It's I'm going to sit down and type my magnum opus lore Bible and then put that on the table and everybody else will read it. So
that would be nice.
I think an interesting next question would be to dig into those elements that maybe get a bit misunderstood, because the students are obviously working through their modules. They've got a little bit of a taste of what these different roles look like through module assignments, and there's a limited extent to which, even with our staff best efforts, those module assignments can fully mirror the realities of doing these roles in industry. So I think it's going to be really interesting for our students to talk about and dig into a few of those perhaps misconceptions. Maybe I think an interesting lens into this could be what things really surprised you, what coming out of uni and that preparation in the GA, what surprised you about your roles, which elements ended up being a bit more prominent than you thought, and what are the misconceptions that you think the public have about your roles? Maybe we could dig into that Excel thing a little bit, Rebecca.
Now?
We can
no, it's fine.
Otherwise,
It's the most interesting things I've ever said about Excel for several years.
I know. You said it on the nose. There is this conception that writers kind of like lock themselves in a room, writing room. Things are done very differently in, say, like TV, film, and animation than they are in games. The concept of a writing room, depending on the studio, you're lucky if you have one. You need to get really good at writing on an open plan floor, with everyone talking around you, people pitching stuff, scrum meetings going on. And And you also have to get really, really, very, very good at making things quickly, putting them in front of people, and getting it scrapped. And that is just a huge part of our jobs, is the output of work you do is not reflective in any way of the final of the work. The amount of work that gets put into and gets churned and gets put on a wall, scrapped, taken down, put back up again. You have to get used to that. And there is very much a self-hardening process that you have to go through when you first join a studio, which as creatives and artists can be really hard to get over. Like that, I would say, is probably your first obstacle, is not being precious. Accepting the fact that you don't know everything, and taking feedback from people that don't understand the work that you do. And learning that language will help you survive a long time. And that is hard to do. It's really hard to do. So no, we're not all on our typewriters or with our quills, even though a lot of people in the games industry, even in the industry, think that's what we do.
Yeah.
It's Excel, it's not sexy. You can make them look sexy, which does help. But you do spend a huge amount of time putting stuff out. It is just writing. You have to get stuff down on the page as fast as you can, as best as you can, with as much collaboration as you can, which, you know, speaking to the writers in the room or anyone with an interest in writing or writer's background, we are so accustomed to working by ourselves, in our rooms, on our novel projects, on our Pinterest boards, on our journals, on our mind maps, that as soon as we get into a space where I am then putting that in front of a group of like potentially 15 people and everyone has a opinion, that's hard. You get used to it, but I will say that is one of the first sort of culture or even creative shocks of going into the industry as a writer. And I know that it's not just writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that goes for pretty much any discipline that I know of so far. Yeah, you get very used to your ideas are not precious. They might lead to something that's great, but that initial moment where you kind of go, hey, here's what I think we should do, is not something you can get attached to.
No, because they'll take it out back and shoot it, and that's okay. You have to accept
and
that.
And sometimes it needs to be done.
Yes.
And sometimes it shouldn't have been done, but it was done by someone who's far more senior than you, and you need to accept it anyway.
Yeah, it's paid a lot more.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, it's interesting from an educator's point of view because, of course, in the student team, we have to make sure everybody's work gets represented, and somebody
100%.
can come up to me as a supervisor and say, "Hey, they took my work out. This is an outrage," and I'll do my best to get that person's work back in so that it can be shown off.
Yeah,
But
you can't
in
say maybe
industry,
your work wasn't good enough.
Yeah, in industry, it's very different for sure. As you know, in my freelancing in industry, then popping back into the classroom setting, I think that's one of the big differences that I notice is that sense of the massive group input into one's own work, which I know across all of our disciplines, that's definitely going to be a big factor. Is there anything else that you guys would like to feed into in terms of not just that collaboration aspect, but also the misunderstandings that people might have about your different roles?
Yeah. I think design can be quite a varied field, especially general game design. And, you know, a lot of people, when they're getting ready for a design interview, especially in Unreal, you work on your blueprint skills, your coding blueprint skills. I haven't had to use that much at all. A lot of my stuff is checking boxes and altering values in Engine and then doing it over and over again to make sure it works. Basically, there's a lot more repetition than there was in student stuff. You do something, you go, okay, that's cool, add it to Git. But no, you do something, you've got to check it a couple times to make sure it works. You check on different configurations of controls, of graphics. You've got to make sure it works because you don't want to be the one who breaks the build. Not in industry, you don't want to be the one who does that. So I guess it's a lot more repetitive than I expected, but I understand fully why it has to be. You also spend a lot more time looking at databases and documents than I expected. You do cover game design documents in the course, but that kind of stuff happens for basically every feature in the game, at least at our studio, because our team is like 70-ish, I think, and you know, especially because about half the studio, I think, work remotely or hybrid. I work remotely here from here in Cornwall, and you know, if someone opens up the editor and goes, "What is this?" they need to know everything about it, and even if it's as simple as you've gone in and done a pass on the cameras in a scene, you need to sort of have proof of why you did what you did. If you were sick and someone needs to do the cameras on the next scene, you want it to be consistent, and you know, they don't know what was going through your mind when you did it. So standardizing things is quite a common practice, and everything needs to be evidenced and written down. And you also spend a lot of time online, in our case at least, in bug databases, getting tagged in bugs and sorting them, because especially with design, regardless of the gluiness or not of it, we're basically the discipline, I'd say, that is in the level the most often, even if you aren't a level designer. We're the ones who are in the game the most. You know, programmers are working on the back end, artists are working in Maya and stuff like that. But we are in the game the most often. So you see things most often. You're most likely to change something that people notice very often. Basically, everything is seen, everything is evidence. You've got to be super careful and make extra sure. Because QA can catch things, but they've got a lot of stuff to do. So you've got to make sure the work you put in is good quality. And even if it's a minimal change, you don't want it to mess up something for someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to bounce off that quickly and just say, like, it's really interesting that you say, like, you've got to work, like, so standardized across the entire project, and that is true. One thing I think is a bit different almost in LD is sometimes with being like people that are in the levels the most, play the most, and playing through the same level hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, we notice a lot of these kind of intricate like niches that people may not notice.
Yeah.
And quite often, I don't know in your case, but in my case I ended up doing work that wasn't necessarily approved. And then proposing it to someone, and then they'll look at it and be like, actually, that's a really good idea, or we should maybe adjust this. Yeah. So I think it's really important to stay standardized, like you said, but I think it's also important to kind of push that boundary and try and almost think 3 steps ahead if you can. So you can kind of future-proof the game experience for everyone else. But I think what's really interesting about being in LD is you need to understand every single working cog in a game to be able to work like efficiently. And going back to what you two said, something one of my leads originally told me in the first few months where I started working in industry was just the phrase "kill your darlings." And it's so true. There was so many things I made that I was so proud of, and I wanted to show off to everyone. I thought it was absolutely amazing, but it just wasn't in scope. It was in tech debt. My lead didn't think it was in like narrative. Or in line with the narrative, or there was just some reason that I wasn't aware of. And then as I matured and grew in industry and gained more experience, I started to learn more about the different aspects of the game, every single department, and then understanding more of those moving cogs, and started to realize why that thing I really wanted to do before that was super cool in my eyes wasn't possible. And it's just being aware of like everything that's ongoing, and that means talking to everybody. Like you need to communicate so much. I think my day is, I work an 8-hour day. I spend about 5 hours of that in meetings. My mornings is just work, and then afternoons just meetings. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump off that as well. Coming from independently sort of like creating my portfolio after work and then like into doing concept art full time, like the things that it's almost like you're doing the portfolio and then you're doing the job, and they're like 2 wildly different things, because portfolios can have this like element, which I'm sure Phoebe can speak to, about pretty pictures and making it attractive, and concept art can very easily fall into that like pretty picture element, that sort of like key art, really flashy stuff, where more often than not we are like in the weeds, like working with design, working with level, with narrative, we're trying to figure stuff out in the most effective way to save everyone time. And that's sort of the main thing that concept art does, and sort of the biggest misconception. And then the other half that I didn't expect when I started my role was just a combination of how long things take and how much you're working and how many stakeholders you have, how long those things take. I've worked on character designs that have taken months, and when you're working on it for your portfolio, it's like, oh, well, I'm just, I'm doing this iteration and then I'm coming to this final piece, and the final piece is like a future thing. It's not even something you're doing, it's something 3D's doing, and they've started and you're integrating with them. You're doing research for them and then they're integrating back to you, and it's not as clear cut as what it felt like working on a portfolio, which was sort of this start, middle, and end. It's this continuous cycle of working on designs with all of these disciplines. And having, like Rebecca mentioned in these different meetings, having like 5 or 6 stakeholders and having to be beholden to brand and narrative and multiple art directors and multiple design directors perhaps, and each of them definitely having input is something you just can't learn until you're in it, and you have to learn whose voice is loudest, and it's a whole thing. I think it's really amazing how everyone here has disciplines that and I think we've all been able to echo the experience of how much more collaborative our jobs are than we maybe first thought.
I think this isn't like time for advice, like pearls of wisdom, handing them out. But I think after what everyone has said is like, the job that you're going in to do isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. Mm-hmm. And that means that you've got to be super passionate and super into the very niche thing that you want to go and do. So if you're a lighting artist, love lighting, man, like really love it. If you're a character artist, go and do that, live and breathe it, because it's not a sprint. It is a long marathon to get to a collective final product. Mm-hmm. And it's the product that's key. It's the end point that matters.
Yeah, you're all working towards one thing together.
Yes.
It's important.
And then we get to have a big party about it when we
Yeah, I think something as well is worth mentioning on that point is like when working in this kind of like cross-collaborative environment and you're working on so many different things, so I think it's really important, especially in larger teams, choose your battles wisely. Don't spend weeks and weeks working on this one little niche thing that you think is really cool that doesn't actually have much of an impact on everything. Work on something that's going to be useful to everyone else, the team, the final product, so you can hand it off so people have those conversations and eventually just up the quality of the product.
Prioritizing is a very real
Yeah.
Great. So I want to leave us 5 minutes for questions at the end. But I think a really great next topic to move into is really building off what we've just been talking about, which is common collaborations that you guys often run into. So obviously, as the audience have just heard, everybody here spends a lot of time talking in meetings to everybody, but there are also going to be other disciplines which your discipline has great synergy with, who you're often collaborating with, where there are particular things that the students might be able to learn about those collaborations. I don't know if anybody would like to get started talking about something like that.
I can jump in, or did you want to? Are you sure? For concept art, for me, it depends if you're doing environments, characters, or props, and that sort of depends who in probably 3D that you're heavily linking to. It could be world artists, it could be weapons and prop and vehicle artists. For me, it's predominantly character art. I'd say over half of my meetings, I am in with the character artists. We're over at each other's desks. When they're 3D modeling from my concepts, either I've done a turnaround or we haven't even got to the turnaround and they've started. And so that they can keep moving, they can use me as someone who can get them more research, more material reference. We are constantly going back and forth. I think character art is who I collaborate with the most, and then secondary is narrative, especially when I'm creating characters that are going to have a narrative focus, constantly checking in with them that what I'm creating hits the right notes for their bio, hits the right notes for anything that we want to use that character for, and just is consistent really with the narrative that we want to convey. I'll pass on to anyone else. So Tom, you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, it depends a lot based on the project as level design, because exactly what a level look like is going to be very different from one game type to another. The two constants, I reckon, are always the art team and the code team. So art are trying to make the same spaces that we essentially.
At the same time.
Often at the same time, yes. That can be you need to curate a very understanding relationship with your art team. It's going to benefit everyone in the long run, because it is possible that you can end up trying to pull in different directions. Like if you get into a position where what looks good is different to what you feel is going to play well, then you've kind of got a problem and you need to figure out how to come to some compromise about that. And it's normally, in most years, going to be what plays well and sticks, and kind of I'll have to figure out a way around it, but they're not always going to feel that way about it. And so there can be some difficult conversations. So it's worth just having a very, very friendly relationship right from the beginning. And then code. So code tend to make the tools, and as well as you tend to implement those tools and use them in the game. So sometimes it's a case of you're almost the like end user for the things that they're going to make. So you're requesting tools and requesting changes and kind of informing them what would be useful. Because in my experience, a programmer really likes just a very detailed brief. They don't tend to like a lot of wiggle room. They're like, just tell me the things to make and I can make the thing. So that's the kind of relationship you tend to have with code. Or reporting back what would be useful, or they might add in some little bells and whistles that you didn't expect, and they'll tell you how to use them, and that's great. But and you'll interact with all the other disciplines as well, but those are like always the fundamental kind of building blocks in my experience with that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to talk about programming, given that we don't have any representation, so that hasn't been on the panel. I think I'm going to make the executive decision that we're going to carry on having this interesting conversation, and if anybody has questions for our panel, please catch us outside.
Okay.
And if anybody else has anything they'd like to kind of contribute on this topic, given we've got about 5 minutes left on the clock.
I can add something quickly just to bounce off you. Yeah, like Tom said, for people that don't know, we used to work together, and we have experienced that double-bladed environment with the art team, and it's not fun. Like you're trying to make something, they push in the other direction, they're trying to make something. In the end, you kind of just make something that's a weird mix of the both and it just doesn't work. So it's really important to get that like very initial friendliness going. And one thing that we do in our studio, for example, is we often base our environments, both LD and art, off the concepts, and we have those conversations with narrative simultaneously. And we try and get it right on the first time. And if we don't, we iterate. And we keep going and we keep iterating until everybody's happy. And if something is going right or there's some tension building, you nip it in the bud immediately. Like we have that conversation. There's no like, oh, I hate this person behind a wall or something. There's no like jaded expressions, you know, it's just everyone's working on the same product at the end of the day. So you need to work simultaneously and harmoniously. And if that isn't working, you need to address it like instantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, something that we've kind of all shown here is that something I suppose you don't expect so much is that, everything happens at once. There isn't an order. We're encouraged at uni to be iterative in our process because you have to be. In the industry, you're making something based on something that is probably already out of date by the time you submit it. Like, everything is getting interwoven, I'm not sure the word, at once. So you need to keep making passes and iterations because it's always changing. You know, if a level block out with the art, it changes the space. And you know, in my work, we're working based on what the engineers have set up for us. But their code changes, so you may need to rework your stuff. It's just iterative, and you can't be mad that you need to revisit something because it's just these changes were made for a reason, and it's all just to improve the quality of the game you're making.
I mean, yeah, I can quickly jump on that as well in terms of like having things remade and having to go in and rework. I think there's a misconception that concept sort of comes at the start and that's where you happen. And there is an element of that we tend to be X amount of time ahead in the sense, so it can sort of go down a waterfall pipeline, but that doesn't always happen and definitely isn't always the case. I've absolutely had to go back and rework concepts, rework characters, rework props, especially when it comes to in-world things and iterations on levels and things like that, having to provide quick and dirty concepts that answer and solve problems, because that's just kind of what the whole role is trying to solve problems for everyone else to keep everything moving. And it's constant all the way up until the end. And yeah, that's kind of the fun of it as well. We're still stuck in.
To finish it off then, I suppose, given the time.
I mean, we've talked a lot about it. Narrative has come up a few times. As Tom said, it's entirely based on the project that you're working on. It completely depends who you are working with and what you're working with those people on. Fable's an RPG. So you can make executive decisions on who our nearest and dearest are. And so we work daily with the quest design team, dialogue and audio teams, cinematics. As Rob said, Rob and I are partners, we're together, and it's really helpful having a concept artist at home because I work with concept art a lot. I have an understanding of Rob's job. It's really hard to say. Rob has an understanding of my job, and so that makes collaborating with our in-house teams so much easier because we're already able to speak each other's languages. But yeah, I think we're all friendly on these sofas.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Departmentally.
An underestimated part of being a games developer is being friendly and personable.
Being nice.
Because you're going to need to work with people and not really annoy them all the time.
Yes. And a bit of that give and take, isn't it? Which I think everybody on the panel's been talking about. You know. Okay, well, looking at our timer, I think I just have time to thank the panel and hope that you as the audience have found this to be an interesting discussion. I'm sorry we didn't have time for questions, but please feel very free to catch anybody
absolutely.
and ask those questions. I'm sure everybody would be keen to have a chat.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
All right. Thank you.
So welcome everyone to this panel today. We're going to be talking about sort of game industry futures. We're going to be exploring, the current state of the industry and kind of trying to gaze forward a little bit about what's happening in the current climate and maybe some future directions that are quite exciting for the industry. So we're going to be talking about the current state of the industry and where we feel it's going, so a bit of future casting there. And we'll try and touch upon some of the more trickier subjects as well, such as the sort of current state with the layoffs, some of the contraction that's happening in the industry, as well as the thorny issue of AI and its usage in the game development process. And we hope to shed some kind of light on what's happening right now and give you some perspective from my colleagues from the industry here who will kind of give their insights and their experience of what's happening and hopefully give us some nice talking points as we kind of go through this panel. So what we'll do is we'll go through some introductions. My name is Brian McDonald. I'm the head of subject for the games programs at Falmouth University. So I effectively run and organise the program. So I'm responsible for pretty much everything from game development all the way to art. And what we'll do is we'll go from my left all the way to my right, and can I get each panel member to introduce themselves, say what role they have in the industry, and say maybe some of the experiences I've had in terms of ship titles or things they're working on currently.
Yeah, me first. Okay, brilliant. My name is Ross Everson. I'm currently an animator at Rebellion, as well as a committee member at Limit Break Mentorship. I'm currently working on something I can't talk about, which is classic. But previously I've worked on both Sea of Thieves and Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin. Yeah, I think that's me.
Cool. So if you can't talk about it, that means it's going to be good?
Oh yeah, always. Awesome.
So my name is Mark Morris. I've been in the industry for about 27, 28 years. I'm not very good at maths, which means I ended up in production. So my background is I've worked in publishing, I've worked in developers, I worked at EA, I ran European publishing for Microsoft about 10 years ago. And then I was most recently at a company called Splash Damage. I was president there, where we did a lot of Gears of War, Gears 4, Gears 5, Gears Tactics, Halo Master Chief Collection. So a lot of big AAA games as a co-dev partner for Microsoft. And most recently, I left Splash Damage and co-founded an investment firm called Supernova Capital. And we buy and sell game companies. So it's been an interesting couple of years. We've had some big ups and some pretty big downs recently. Mm-hmm. Cool.
Thank you.
My name's Ju, or Georgia Higgins. I'm pretty fresh in AAA. I work at Jagex as a character artist. But prior to that, I did bit of indie work with maybe like 15 people sized teams. One of them was working on an MMO, and then prior to that, I was working in quite a small team, working in mobile. But yeah, that's about it pretty much.
Hi, my name is Matt Webster. I'm the founder and CEO of a new studio called Fuse Games, which I started in January of last year. I've started making games in 1990. I spent 32 years at Electronic Arts, making a boatload of different types of games. Most recently, prior to founding the studio, I spent 10 years running Criterion Games. So I've made Burnout games, I've made Need for Speed, I've made Star Wars games, Battlefront 2. I wrote the design for the original FIFA game back in 1992. It wasn't called FIFA then. Yeah, done loads of different types of games.
Thank you.
My name's Alex Bellows. I am currently the principal environment artist at That's No Moon. Previously to joining here, I was a Respawn as a senior, shipping Jedi Survivor. I've been in the industry for like 12 years, but it's been like a very strange 12 years, not all AAA, some in mobile, some in indie, some in iGaming, but for the past 6 years it's been AAA.
Cool. Thank you very much, and thanks panel for introducing yourself and giving some insight about that experience you've had. And there's some kind of varied experiences we have here, so it'll be really interesting to hear some insights as we go through these questions. So the first one is a bit of an opener, and I'm just going to open it out to everyone to kind of talk about their own points of view here. So what exciting directions do you feel the industry is moving towards? And I think we'll start from Ross and we'll work our way along again.
So I'm setting the tone.
Yeah, setting the tone, Ross.
I feel like with a lot of things that are happening right now, I think honestly we're going to see a resurgence of indie again, which I think is really beneficial to some people here on the panel even. Because I think with a lot of stuff that's happening right now with layoffs, like a lot of talent is being sort of launched into the space where there's a small amount of jobs right now. And I think that creates innovation and, you know, exciting new games that we'll see coming in the future. I think there's going to be like a second renaissance of indie games like we had back with like Super Meat Boy and those sort of games. I think that's what we're going to see again, personally.
Okay, thanks, Ross.
Yeah, I probably generally agree with that. For me, though, I think there's a slightly different angle because I do agree that, you know, one of the silver linings on the clouds of the recent layoffs are going to be the birth of new ideas and new studios. But I've been particularly interested in what's coming out of the Roblox universe. I think it's actually starting to prove itself, or it's at least getting recognized as a fantastic test bed for really interesting ideas. And I think the recent success of the game Lethal Company is a great example of somebody who honed their craft by making games, getting it in the hands of younger kids, to be fair, but really learned something and then applied that to sort of the graduation platform, which is Steam, and has found incredible success. So that dynamic of being able to play around in a new platform, Fortnite's going to be doing something very similar, starting to do something similar. I think that's going to be another, I don't know, flavor or color to what comes out of the indie space, and I'm really interested in seeing where that goes.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, that younger audience as well, who've grown up with Minecraft and now Roblox, and all these are platforms that people are going to develop on, and
they're game developers.
Yeah, they're
right?
game developers.
They're 12-year-old game developers now.
And they're shipping.
Yep, and they're shipping, and they're making money, which is crazy. But I think that's a sign of where the industry is going to continue to go.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much the same view as Ross. I'm really excited to see more indie games come out of these spaces, especially since so many high-level or like very talented people have been laid off. Yeah, just generally really excited.
Yeah, I suppose a bit of that. I mean, I've been around long enough to have seen a bunch of these things happen, as is Mark, and you know, I think some of those patterns do replicate themselves. Also, what I think is most surprising for me, or not surprising, but because there was a trend, but it feels like for me now, the sorts of games that I'm used to making, large scale, I suppose what you call AAA, who really knows what that means. I think that it's much more credible now that you have a smaller core production team, and then you bolt on capacity and capability and specialisms. And certainly in this country, that's where I see a heap of opportunity for people who want to work on multiple types of games, not necessarily not everyone's got an opus within them, you know what I mean? Like, and there's a lot of desire to work on many different things, and there's a great way that you can do that through working on other people's games. And the reality is you get better at making games the more you make. So if you're going making one every few years, there's a limited number of, so I look at it, there's a limited number of games left within me, I think. But for other people, that you can hone your teeth, you can learn different things, you can see different things. And that's super exciting, I think. So for all the students that are coming into an industry, it feels like a little bit, oof. But actually, the reality is it's still the largest by far entertainment medium on earth. And it's not contracting, it's just not growing as fast as people thought it was going to.
You know, and I think that a lot of people say the COVID sort of bubble, and this is a bit of correction.
Yeah, and that's every industry went through that.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'm most excited for is this from more of a tech and I guess potential standpoint is we're reaching a point with all the layouts and everything is every studio is kind of going back to the drawing board. Tech stacks have sort of, they've been making the same type of games for nearly a decade at this point. And with the recent innovations from Unreal, we're seeing everyone's having to relearn how to make games. Like professionals with 20 years experience with some of the biggest titles in the world. Me as an environment artist, I'm having to relearn how to make environment art. And we're at this point where, obviously the layouts are terrible, and I think part of that is people having to figure out what the next generation leap is and what the next big tech innovation is. And I'm excited from the perspective of, I remember when normal maps first came on the scene, and it was like everyone had to relearn how to make games. Like games took this huge monumental leap, and I feel like we're on the precipice of that. Like when we get out the other side of this bad patch, I feel like there's going to be another big monumental leap in tech, in our visual qualities, how we make games. Is very interesting.
It's like that shift when we went from 2D to 3D. There was a lot of relearning and new innovations coming out, and lots of opportunities for those coming into the industry to kind of get ahead in those sort of technologies.
Well, with that, it's quite funny because there's people coming into the industry who know more and are more useful to a team than people with 10 years experience because Nanite really has, and not just Nanite, there's lots of tech coming on board, procedural tech, PCG, it's just turned a lot of roles on its head, and there's juniors who are far more capable and useful to a team than experienced artists.
That's super interesting, yes, thanks for that all. So now I'm going to open this one out. So one of the things that like many students are now concerned with is with the layoffs and the decreasing, or the perception of a decreasing job pool. Many students are concerned with the state of the industry and what it means for their chances of breaking in. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to get into the industry, bearing in mind that there's that bit of anxiety about where we are right now? So what would be the advice? And I'll just open that out to anyone who wants to take that one.
I went through this in 2012, like when we had a bit of a crash then, and I didn't get my foot in the door in AAA until I was already in the industry for about 6 years. I think something that helped me a lot is get a creative job. Like find a job where you still get to grow as a person, grow to work within teams, sharpen your artistic eye. I started in mobile games, serious games, making educational content using game technology. It still allowed me to learn tools and learn to be efficient and productions and Jira and all these horrible things. I slowly worked my way up into AAA because during the time, games was in a really bad place. And a lot of my mentees I work with at the moment, I give the same advice. They ask the exact same question. Like, the industry's in a bad spot right now. What are my chances? And I'm having to be very honest and say, yeah, it's very difficult right now, but don't give up on at least getting a creative job somewhere where you still get to, exercise that part of your brain and you can carry on developing to grow towards the role you actually want. I think it's very easy to be despondent and throw your hands in the air and say, okay, it's hopeless right now, I'll go do something else, which is completely non-creative. And I think that's a massive shame. Like, there is a lot of disheartened artists right now. And the best thing I can say is just try and find something where you get to scratch the itch in one way or another. Even if it's, one of my friends went into, he's an environment artist, he's currently working in a photography studio processing film. Like, okay, fine, that may not be what you wanted to do, and that's completely fine. But at least you're still doing something. You're still learning about aesthetic. You're learning about images, and one day that can come full circle and help you. So I think just because that's what I did, that's the only reason I can give that advice. That's what I did. I left a construction job and went and worked in mobile. Don't at least try and get a role which is creative, even if it necessarily isn't in games. Because every field needs a creative person in one way or another. That's my advice.
I think also I could say about that as well, because I graduated from here in like 2017, and my first games industry job was 2021. In that time, I tried to keep up my animation skills. I actually ended up like teaching game development at one point because, like you were saying, like staying in that creative space and having, scratching that itch is super, super important. I actually took the student game that I was making here at Falmouth and worked on it for another 6 months afterwards, and then released it on Steam. It wasn't like successful or anything, but it's like my first interview that I got at my first industry job. I was just talking about like all my recent stuff that I'd done. I went and did like online courses and stuff. And the senior animator was like, "Oh, I've just seen this Karate Crab game in your portfolio. What's that?" And then he's like watching it in my interview, and he's like, "This is really cool." And that was something that I did in between uni and my first job, and it actually kind of paid off. Like, it wasn't the best thing I ever done, but it was showing that I could like sort of keep going after the fact and create something. And, do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. And that was pretty good for that, I think. Just staying in that kind of headspace. But I had a job that wasn't specifically that.
These are both really great examples of what I would say is, I think, an essential life skill that everybody has to go through when they start off in their career, which is resilience. You've got to develop resilience. I think it's especially important in the creative industry because what you're trying to do is, a lot of people want to do this. I mean, it's a lot more crowded than what it used to be. And what's going to separate you from somebody else who also wants this job is resilience. And it's also, the second piece of advice would be to focus on what you're good at, right? Like, find something that you're really, really good at and lean into that. The more you can stand out for being really excellent at one thing versus kind of good at a bunch of things, I think you're going to have a better opportunity to find a role. But, so I can go on and on about things. And this is largely based on my own experience as well. I think that resilience is also about relying on yourself, right? Like, if you're looking for other people to help you, you're probably going to be let down more often than not, unfortunately. So you might get lucky. Sometimes you get lucky. But if you rely on yourself, develop your own skills, hone your skills, stay resilient, stay passionate, figure out what you're really, really good at, get really good at that. Eventually, somebody's going to recognize that and go, let's give this person a shot.
Any other advice from panel?
Yeah. I mean, it's never going to be a straight line going from uni. It's going to be really difficult. And I think my experience is quite similar to Ross's, in that I started in the kind of like adjacent games kind of area, and then went into lecturing for a little bit, and then moved over to mobile. So I was doing so I'm a character artist, and I was doing a lot of generalist artwork. So it didn't perfectly align, but I was still in that kind of like space where I was still being creative and still exercising that. There was another point that I forgot.
That's a great. I'm going to lean on that one because you mentioned something about generalism. So if I've just gone through this, trying to bootstrap a studio, and you can't afford specialisms. It's a luxury, and I kind of think you almost don't want it anyway, because they like to call it T-shaped people. It's pie-shaped people, I think. So deep subject matter expertise on something, but a broad range of capabilities that have got some depth, so you can bridge those gaps, right? And this is why I really love what's happening here, because you're going to make a team. Originally, you're going to start with constraints. So I've got a limited amount of time, and maybe I've only got one engineer and 3 artists. What game am I going to make with that? And then you go at that, and you make something, and you find a way through. And it may just be that. So everyone I meet asks 3 questions of what's your earliest game in memory, and we have a conversation about that. What's the game that made you then think, how am I going to get into? Oh, there's an industry here. I quite like that. And then the third one, what's the way in? And you're right, it's never a straight line. And so many times I speak to people and they're studying to be, let's take an animator. One of our technical artist. I started as an animator. Didn't even know what a technical artist was. There's so many roles, and then someone came in and talked about what job they did. And went, oh, that's me. I want to do that. So this is, I think, one of the reasons I'm here, or we're here, to try and say, it's more than just the one thing that you might be focusing on that you think is the area that you want to go in. Have that open mind and think about applying yourself in a slightly different way, and then you broaden your reach, and then makes it much more attractive. Because if I've got one person and we've got a spot for one person, and we've got someone who's got a range of skills versus someone who's got massively deep subject matter expertise in one thing, I might choose the range.
Yeah, because if, say, you pivot away from a certain technology or a certain thing, then that person might have to skill up, whereas the generalist could probably push themselves in different directions.
And I think when you're thinking about generalism, you've naturally got an open mind.
Yeah.
Versus, no, this is the thing that I want, and I'm going to go after that, and that's great because mastery is a brilliant motivation for someone. But that open mind and being willing to learn new things, and Mark says about resilience, and taking the knockbacks and applying that in a different way, and thinking about what you want to do in a slightly different way, that's really attractive.
So thanks, Al. So we're just moving on to the next question. This is the one that's a kind of hot button topic right now, and it causes a bit of anxiety in certain areas, certainly writers and artists. So we're going to talk about AI and certainly its usage in the industry. And I think what we're seeing is, things like large language models, the ubiquity of them and the ease of use of them compared to previous kind of AI tools. It means they're becoming more and more used in, just general sort of culture, but they're also getting used in the game development process. So there's a lot of bigger, larger companies that are adopting this, and also indie companies who are also adopting it as a sort of cost-saving exercise or a way of, ideating and various other things. So what do you think there is a place for AI in games, or do you think it's something that you would rather avoid? And I think I'm aware that this could be a contentious issue, and I'm more than happy to hear all sorts of opinions on this because people have different viewpoints. So I'll just open it up for a starter. So who wants to start?
Who wants to start?
I'll have a shot at it.
Yeah, go for it.
When I made Star Wars Battlefront, there was 475 people on that team. It was an insane amount of people just chewing through, creating a lot of amazing content. The reality is, I think games of that scope and scale will get fewer and fewer because it's just too expensive, and you're starting to see the first party studios where you've seen a lot of closures because the reality is they used to operate on different game economics, right? Because it's a first party studio, so it's there to sell hardware. So the realities of, if you're looking at evaluating a $300 million to make Spider-Man 2, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this is sensational, but if the last game was 150, where's the other 150 gone? Because it doesn't look twice as good at, do you know what I mean? So I think that the reality of large teams will adjust and change, and so then you think about, okay, how do I make that scope and scale and the vision and deliver that with a smaller group of people? And the reality is the tools will get better, and AI will become a tool. Where we are right now is, you can't put a game out on Steam if you've got AI generated content until, certainly in the US, that copyright law is solved. To copyright something, it has to have human input. So if you've generated it with an AI, you probably can't get copyright on something. There's obviously all the provenance stuff at the moment, which is, if I went to a concept artist and say, I think take this inspiration, that inspiration, and that inspiration, and create this thing, and they go off and they'll go and do Google searches, and they'll get all that visual inspiration, and then inside their brain they craft the image. The AI is kind of doing the same thing. It's just you can see the provenance, which makes it much more difficult because you can see the inspiration. So until those things get solved, that's going to be a problem for these tools to become used. I would, for anyone using tools right now, take a lot of care, because the reality is in many of the terms and services, you actually don't own the output. So take a lot of care. And by the way, you're giving off the input. So just take care and be cautious, but this is a train that isn't going to stop, but it will be able to navigate it, I think, and it will become a tool for people once we get those constraints and understand real capacities. If you're trying to write software with an AI, I mean, the debugging part is the problem. Because certainly when I tried to do it, it's like, oh god, I'm going to try and figure this out. I sort of described the problem, and it was a decent enough output, but when you try debugging the problem without a memory, it's really hard.
I'm really excited for AI.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I love the games industry is it's the combination of creativity and technology, and the fact that the technology constantly changes underneath the creativity makes it the most dynamic creative industry in the world. I mean, film technology stayed the same for 100 years, right, until it went to digital. Games technology, 20 years ago, people were building their own engines, and now you've got two very good off-the-shelf options in less than 30 years. So that pace of evolution is just going to continue, and AI is just another step along that path. And for me, I think, step one is with any kind of disruptive technology is like, what's your attitude towards it? Well, like, from my standpoint, I look at the past. People that embrace disruptive technologies find new opportunities, find new business opportunities, find new creative opportunities. The ones that master that the quickest are going to succeed. So rather than be afraid of it, figure out how you can use it, figure out what it can do for you. I mean, everything you're saying, there's all the legalities, all that stuff is true. That stuff will work itself out. But that's the petri dish of we don't know. And inside that petri dish, that's where creativity thrives, I think. So I don't have the answer beyond that, but I think that somebody somewhere is going to do something. We're all going to go, why didn't I think of that? Oh my God, that's amazing. And it's going to create some new experience. So I'm broadly very excited about it.
I think I'll be the token artist on the panel and say, like, part of me just always asks, like, where does it stop? Where does, like, this AI come in? And, well, yeah, like, game development is the perfect blend of maths and art, in my opinion. And I feel like part of the art can be taken out of it if you are using something that isn't human to create it. This is just how, like, I feel about it. This doesn't represent my employer. This is the sort of thing where it is like, I think as a tool, there's like certain tools that I use where it's like something I move in Maya will then move the thing after it. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Is it AI? I don't know. Is it? It might be. So it's like, I use that to help create something a bit quicker, but it's not replacing my job. And I think that's probably where I'm a bit like, well, are we just going to have a games industry just like with 3 people in each company and they're just using AI to create everything? That's where I feel like the magic of game development is going to start disappearing a little bit. And then I think, personally, that's, again, like I said before, where we're going to have more indie companies like popping up, and they'll probably say things like, this was not made with AI. And I think, it could become something of like a marketing tool. It's kind of like when you see that game recently that's been made with stop motion animation instead of, I don't know, 3D or 2D. It's like, it's going to become a gimmick, which I think is kind of a shame, personally. Because, it's just like, where does it end? Like, where does AI stop and creativity start? That's how I feel about it.
I guess there's a tension here, Ross, that you've talked about, like you use a tool to kind of help you do some of your work, and I think there's a school of thought that AI is just that other tool.
It's not. It's not black and white, is it? It's like it's a weird like fine line there. But to me, like, art is made by artists, by human artists. That's how I feel about it.
I think just to answer your question, like you said, where does it end? And like, I've experimented with AI, and it ends when it becomes useless. Like it's funny, you can create a whole lot of tats right now and very little with, like, if you look at cinematography, right, in movies, you don't just shoot a shot with a lens and you grab like any lens from like Jessup's or something and shoot, and there we go, we've got a shot. There's a lot that goes into creating a shot. There's bokeh, there's the way the fall off works and focus and all these sorts of things, these very nuanced things that you don't know what you're looking at, and we're meant to, as artists, imply to the audience. The audience is not meant to be aware of the tricks we're doing, and unfortunately right now AI can't do that. AI is great at, like, I literally have no clue where to start. Let me throw doo-doo against the wall and see what sticks. But that's 5% of the process, because once you get like an idea, then we actually start being artists. You have an art director saying, right, okay, cool, this is a good shape, Now let's start refining it. And as soon as we actually start getting to the point of using art to actually inform our ideas and grow our ideas, in my experience up to this point, it's almost useless, because when I ask for a very specific thing, like this stage right now, I don't want you to have yellow salsa or trends. I want it to be a certain shade of orange, this exact shade. If I type that into AI, you got new shoes on now, and you've got a different haircut, and you've got a different shirt, and there's a different person sat on the end. And I'm like, great, this was great for me to generate a very broad idea, but for me to refine this into a product, it's been near impossible. Now, one thing I will say about the software thing, which has been very funny, is it did teach me Houdini. I would type in a very specific, like I came from substance designer, tried to learn Houdini as as visual programming, and be the exact same, and nothing behaved the way I wanted it to. And I'm like, why won't I literally would type in, why won't this function work? And it would come up with a bunch of reasons, and of the 15 reasons, one of them tended to be true. And I managed to figure out and troubleshoot and learn. Now, if I said to Houdini, I want to do this pipeline where I create buildings using X, Y, Z, useless. Couldn't even begin to take into considerations all the complications working with Unreal Engine and working in a production pipeline and making a product and making something that's, all these sorts of things. So AI is very superficial right now. It's very... I'm not saying this to like sound sensation, it's useless right now. To actually make a product to finish, it gets you 5% of the way. And one thing I will say is, if you looked at where AI was 2 years ago, it was even worse, and it made a lot of big leaps in 2 years. And maybe it'll make even more big leaps. But we can't get people to replicate the nuance of the artistic masters that we have right now.
That's a great point. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I actually did this thing because I typed in. So I had an art director and me, and what we were looking for was we wanted output, but he would describe an output in a completely different way of me, because he would talk about composition and what lens type he wanted and where they wanted what sun was, and so he used the language of art to talk to the AI, and it generated a way better result than it did for me. So it's not people think that anyone can do it, and I don't think that will be true. It will be because I think they'll fix all these the memory and these bunch of things, but it will still be a supplementary tool for the talent that will direct it. So
it's a new programming
I don't see
language.
it ain't going to replace you. It will augment you, right? So that's how I see it.
If it's like a tool, then it's but it seems like that's not the language being used by a lot of higher ups and big companies. It sounds like it's more of a let's use it to time save, and then what you're seeing with the industry, that's like the language that's actually being used. I think that's quite dangerous, because if it was just a tool, we just talk about it like it was a tool.
Yes.
But we're not. We're up here on the panel talking about now. So
you don't talk about tools, about where we get our content from. So one of the big issues I have right now, I worked for ArtStation for a year. That platform I owe my career to, but the fact that they, for example, don't take a stand against this, they don't stop people scalping from there. Now, other companies have seen that that's the core issue for every artist. The core issue is, where do you get your data? And right now, it's from everyone's artwork, and nobody consents to that. Now, other companies are making smart moves. So, for example, Ubisoft have explored this, where they have such a big data set across all their games. Right, our data set we're sampling from is our own content. And we will, with so many examples of world building, and so many examples of composition in any Ubisoft game, like how many Assassin's Creeds have there been? And that's interesting to me. I'm like, okay, now we've solved what my fundamental problem with AI is, which is the morality about where you get content. Companies are already starting to learn from that and say, okay, if that's the core issue, how can we solve that? And now that's a very luxurious position, because there's not many companies with a data set like Ubisoft, but it's a start point to go, right, okay, if we're not okay with scalping artwork from other artists, is this a okay solution? And everyone's gone, yes, that's a fair choice. And I think that's the other thing which we haven't spoken about, which is the morality around it and about where we get our content from.
Yeah, I think the morality is one of the things that's kind of to catch up in all this debate. Is the usual, Silicon Valley disruption kind of side of things. Is like build the technology and then figure out the consequences and the use.
Creativity is built on copying. Yeah. Copying, combining ideas, and transforming it into something else. So we've all, you learn piano by copying something. So I think I understand the reason why it gets a motive. Yeah. So I do understand when people are, it's like when Google came along and suddenly I mean, we were making Burnout 2, and we were talking about we needed a pier, and we had a place. It was the inspiration of the place was Southern California, and someone put Brighton Pier in it, and it's like, well, it didn't look right, does it? Because it's not inspired by the location. And suddenly you've got Google, you can go and search for these images, and and you're using that for inspiration, and you're potentially even, you're copying the design and the construct of something that exists in order to, create the illusion of a believable world. And so it's quite difficult right now because there's a lot of emotion in it. And I think we have to get used to a little bit of that.
I like how this
probably
conversation
churn for a little while.
This conversation has sort of turned into what's the nature of art
Yeah.
at its core, because I think that I often think about the issue of effectively scrubbing ArtStation and borrowing images from other people, and how that is that commercialized? How can people be compensated? It sort of is reminiscent of, I don't know, the arguments in the late 80s and 90s when rappers were sampling, right? And like what was constituted a sample. And I think they started to define it in terms of the seconds or like milliseconds to a certain extent. And some of that stuff is so abstracted, like I didn't know that was sampled from the Beatles or whatever. But there's a valid concern there. I think like you can't just steamroll over that attribution of originality and the lifeblood of artists is the compensation for that, right? So you don't want to remove that livelihood because otherwise people aren't going to be motivated to do it. I end up sitting on the fence because I can argue both sides of these points, right? Like because history has been defined exactly what Matt was saying by copying. In fact, that you are inspired. They're like, artists today scrub ArtStation through inspiration, but because it's been done digitally, suddenly it takes on a slightly more menacing tone. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm an eternal optimist. That's why I fall on the side of, you know what? I think we're going to be okay. We'll figure this stuff out, because at the end of the day, it's going to be theoretically in service of creating a product, and if the people that are involved are compensated fairly and people are entertained at the end of the day, the process by which it gets made sort of goes into the background. And I'm hoping that with AI that we're going to see in some way, shape, or form new versions of that. I can't prove it, but I optimistically hope that's the case.
Certainly, with the speed it's moving, we kind of like
even if it's just speed, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's just an accelerant.
Yeah. There's one point I will make about that, which is so I had this conversation with a friend, and we had the word emotionality brought in, and I was like, "You're right. You can't use emotionality as part of a very pragmatic discussion." My view on AI is it's a very selfish perspective of, you're right. People do copy, but we copy and we add and we iterate. And one of the issues I have right now is AI can't take something and make it better. It can take it and re-jingle it into something new, but it's making it better. And I think that's where I draw a line of, I want things to improve and be the reason art makes big dramatic leaps. In fact, anyone in here got a portfolio review with me, I said, do not take reference from existing games. You are like, a game is imitation of life. And if you do an imitation of an imitation of an imitation, suddenly we just get something very not great. Pretty much, I don't think I've seen a single example of it where I go, oh, you did an exact copy of something that already exists. Oh, that's actually better. I prefer that to the original. Very rare that happens. I always say, see something, be inspired by something, but it should be yours. You should do something new. You should put a twist on it, add your flair to it. And I think that's where from an establishment, I want to see art improve. And I don't think right now, in the current way we use AI, we're not improving art. We're fast tracking people to get to the point of improving it. But I think the way it's being used right now is not like that. It's, I just need something, I just need an image here. I don't really care what. Like some marketing companies have done it terribly, where it's like, I need a banner, and rather than pay a graphic designer to make a banner, AI make me a really cool summer banner. Yeah. And they use that, and you just go, wait, it looks like AI. And not in the sense of, it's crap. It's just soulless, it lacks taste. And it hasn't. That's where my issue is. I want to see art get better. I don't want to see it just be derivative.
Excellent. And on that note, we're now out of time. So I'd like to thank my guests here for an excellent discussion. So can we get a round of applause, please? Hopefully everybody enjoys the rest of EXPO, and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you again.
Thank you. Do introductions, starting over here with Samson.
Yeah, hey, I'm Samson. I'm an alumni from the design course. I graduated last year, and I now work as a junior game designer at All Interactive.
Wonderful.
I'm Benjamin, and I was an alumni in 2022 in the game design course. And I work as a junior implementation designer at Ballistic Moon.
Wonderful.
Hello, I'm Adele. I was in the MA Game Art I was in Bachelor's Game Art and then I went on to do MA Game Art, and I'm currently a social media coordinator at Sumo Group.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Freya. I graduated from the writing course in 2022 and I work as a market researcher for Endreams.
Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm a graduate from last year from the Game Development Art course, and I'm a junior UI UX designer at Space 8 Games.
Wonderful. Really, really good. Well, so let's start off with maybe a fun question, hopefully a fun question. And the question is, what is your fondest memory of studying at Falmouth University? And we'll start over here with Samson.
Fondest memory. I mean, I'd say the expos are always the fondest memories for me. Like every year, first year it was online, so that one was a bit of a challenge. But second year, third year, like this year's fantastic. Like it's always been like the best part of the year to come together, see what everyone's made, and like celebrate the games everyone's been working on.
Absolutely, it's really exciting for us too. So thank you very much for being here. How about you, Ben? Fondest moment, fondest memory from studying at Falmouth?
I'd definitely say first year, the team development module in first year, got really close with the people on my team, and we just had a lot of fun making the game that we're making. Luckily, this was before COVID, so it wasn't at home, although it was at home for some of it. And again, I guess the expo was a big part of that. It was the first expo, I believe, in my first year. It was online, but it was still just really, really great because it was just all about celebrating everyone's work and having loads of fun.
For sure. Now you got me curious. What was the name of your first year game that you enjoyed making?
Next Day Delivery. Our game actually won the first year vote in that year as well, which was really exciting.
Wonderful. Oh, very, very exciting. Very cool. And how about you?
Mine's a bit of a weird one. So my fondest memory was actually during COVID. So we went remote and worked at home, and I got really close with my housemates, and we ended up playing like day in, day out the Phoenix Wright games. Just playing them with my housemates was lovely. Just like the friendship and the bonds I made at university, I'd say.
Wonderful. So the social connections, really, really important. That's great. What about you, Freya?
I think probably my second year of uni is one thing that really like stood out as a good part of the experience for me. Like my team, we had like such good chemistry together, and it's kind of when everything sort of like clicked, I think. Like, we already had a year of doing game dev, and then we were in this really cool team, we made this like amazing project. And yeah, like we showed it off at the expo, which was another highlight. But just like, yeah, learning to like create something in a team and kind of being shown that like, yeah, teamwork can be really, really fun when you're with a group of people that really clicks with you, I think was probably a really good experience.
I'm glad people enjoy teamwork and also the expo. That's wonderful. How about you, Abby? Sort of fondest memory?
Yeah, I think sort of the same lines as Frey. In third year, things sort of really clicked to me in terms of what it was I wanted to do. I sort of chose a project that was like a lot of UI UX work. So it was good to sort of have a year with a team that I trusted to just really hone in on my skills and just pour everything into.
Wonderful. Very good. Okay, so we'll shift into kind of your relationship between your academic and your work experiences. And so the next question, what is something you did while studying which you feel paid off when looking for work in the industry? So something you did while studying which you feel really paid off for you when you were looking for work in the industry. Yeah, and maybe we could even reverse the order. We'll mix things up. So Abby, what do you think about that? So something you did while studying which you feel paid off when looking for work in industry?
Well, I had to do a lot of sort of self-studying to sort of get used to my role. So I ended up taking on side projects that weren't necessarily to do with games, just so I could get some UI UX work and get sort of experience working for a client. So I think that really helped me learn how to take feedback and also build my portfolio.
That's great. Were you able to leverage your kind of portfolio modules to that effect also, or?
Yeah, lots of my personal work. I sort of analysed what I was already doing on my game teams and then sort of adjusted my personal projects so that they sort of fill the gaps that weren't getting filled.
What a good strategy. So almost kind of min-maxing your own curriculum
Yeah.
there. And yeah, powerful, really good. Freya, what do you think? Something you did while studying that you feel paid off when looking for work in industry?
Yeah, I think a big component of my job is looking at the pitches and stuff that we get sent through. I work in the third-party publishing department, and so I think a lot of the work we did on the kind of biz dev side, so making a pitch, making an itch page, presenting and learning to present ourselves, that side, other than the dev side, really helped me get my role.
Wow, so actually the kind of pitching and promotional materials.
Yeah, more so than the dev side, for sure, definitely was something that stood out and helped me a lot.
It's really good to hear. Every time I look at the rubric and I see 10% for promotional materials, I'm like, I don't know, is that too much? And when people pitch, I'm like, I'm not sure, should we have them pitch? But I'm glad to hear. that paid off. Now, embarrassingly, I'm going to have to ask you your name one more time. Adele. Okay, wonderful. So Adele, something you did while studying which you feel paid off when looking for work in industry?
I'd say juggling modules really helped, because in my job as social media coordinator, I'm often shifting from different tasks constantly, and I have to be very adaptable as well as what I do. So for example, sometimes there'll be internal or external events that prevent you from publishing a post, or going out with something externally. So you have to be quite adaptable with the way you work. So experiencing those different modules, changing up workflows, experiencing lots of different workflows as well helped, and kind of doing things that don't really fit into what I was studying. So I was doing game art, but I was also editing videos and writing blogs, and that kind of aspect of the work really paid off in the job I'm in currently.
So would you say that being sort of T-shaped or pie-shaped has been beneficial to you?
Yeah, I'd say so.
And also kind of multitasking, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating, really cool. So Ben, something you did while studying that you think paid off when looking for work in industry?
So obviously the collaborating with others on your team to make your project is really, really good experience. One thing I definitely did a lot in my third year was collaborating with other teams to see how you can help each other. And I feel that kind of obviously I'd networked with people throughout my year, but doing that kind of networking and seeing what kinds of skills other people on other teams are using and how you can learn from that, I really felt that was really valuable. And I guess it's just kind of you're not just, it can sometimes feel a bit competitive in the Games Academy to be oh, we're making our game, you're making yours. But it really isn't. It's really about everyone trying to make the best thing that everyone can make, because we're all one group and we're all trying to help everyone get into the industry, right? Especially post-university, I feel one of my biggest assets is all of the people that I know who did get into the industry and can help me with my portfolio, help me with my CV, or even just that I know people in the industry that can help me get help me get applications in and things like that. So it's just definitely really, really valuable to get to know people, and really, really valuable to get to know people and how they work, and how you can learn from them, I think is what I'd say.
No, that's fascinating, Ben, and I'd like to see if I can explore that a little bit more. So when you were trying to collaborate with other teams, how did you go about that? What were your approaches there?
There was a team that sat in the opposite row to my team in third year, who didn't have any designers, and we didn't have any programmers.
Okay.
So they helped us program a lot of our systems in the game, and we helped them do their level design.
Wonderful.
And we did that with other teams as well, where they would help us do one thing, and then we would look at their game and give them feedback and do play tests or something like that.
Did you tend to do that during sort of studio practice sessions? Or?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, wonderful. And it sounds like networking was also a big part of this, just getting to know people.
I think it's really important, especially since, basically, if you imagine how hard it is to network with people who are already in the industry, remember you can network with people who aren't in it yet, who will be in it in a few years.
Yes, starting with the people up on the stage, and everything. No, that's wonderful. That's really good, Ben. What about you, Samson? Something you did while studying that you think paid off when you were looking for work in industry?
Yeah, I think very similar to Ben's point, it is not a big industry. It feels like a big industry when you're not in it, but when you're in it, people name drop people that you know, and everyone kind of knows everyone to a certain extent. So networking from the get-go is really important, because, as Ben said, the people that you're studying with are going to be the people, your peers, hopefully, in industry. You want to make a good impression. You want them to speak highly of you. And obviously, networking doesn't stop after uni stops. It carries on. LinkedIn, online, online game jams. Networking is a really big component of the games industry because, it is just as much sometimes about who you know as it is about what you know in the industry. Yeah.
Wonderful. No, that's very well said. Okay, so we've got kind of 2 more questions, and then I think we might even have a little bit of time for Q&A toward the end. So out there in the audience, maybe think about some questions that you might ask as follow-up, and we'll see if we can get some time to do that right at the end. But this one, I think this is a pretty interesting and exciting question. So think about advice that you could give people, and specifically, what advice would you give a Falmouth student right now who is starting their first industry job? So there's somebody who's sort of graduated from Falmouth and they're about to start or starting their first industry job. What would be some advice that you might give them, do you think? And we could start with you, Samson, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. I think something I wish that I had been more on it with when starting was just being okay with asking for help. When I started, I kind of had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I was like, I've done 3 years, I should know these things. I should be able to get given a task and just do it and then be able to show my boss, look, isn't this great? Look what I've done. But it is, it's not like that at all. It's, as you guys know from being in the GA, games are made by teams. They're very rarely made by one person. But you all have to lean on each other and be okay with, I'm always now that I'm okay with it, I'm poking our programmers, our lead programmers, I'm a designer, I'm not quite sure how to do this, and through that, I then learn the better way, and next time I might not need to ask because I asked in the first place. So I would say asking for help, being okay with not knowing things. You never know everything there is to know about the job. It's learning throughout your entire career. So just ask questions, I'd say, is a really good way to start.
Wonderful. Do you find that people are starting to ask you questions now also? Yeah,
that's quite nice. As you obviously progress in your career, so now there's people who have started after me. I was obviously the newbie when I started. People have started after me, and there's, they come to you for onboarding or we've got in-house tools that the programmers make that integrate with Unreal, and it's being able to show other people stuff. It's that kind of feedback of. It gives you a reminder of okay, we are all on our own little, our own path to learning, and we're all just helping each other through that. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So how about you, Ben? Advice you would give to a Falmouth student who's just starting their first industry job?
I actually had a really similar experience to what Samson just described. Actually, reminded me when I started, I had the same thing where I was I want to ask questions, but I had to push myself to ask them, and I found that it really paid off. I think someone literally told me at a work event, a work party later, oh, they really liked how you kept asking questions. I was oh, really? I thought they thought I was stupid. It's no, they don't think that at all. They just think oh, this person wants to improve, they want to help out, and they want to do things the correct way. What you don't want is someone who doesn't do things the correct way and then does it wrong, basically, because that will cost more time later down the project and from someone who needs to know what they're doing higher up, probably. So I probably just doubled down on what Samson was saying. And also just trust that you do vaguely know what you're doing. Obviously don't think you just know everything that you're doing, but trust that you are a valued member of the team and that you have valuable input, even if your input is from someone who's new. Well, it's just as valuable as someone who's been around for a while who might have more dated knowledge or something like that. So yeah.
So there's an element of self-confidence that seems to be very important.
Yeah, I think so. When someone comes to ask you a question and you know the answer, that's good. You know the answer. Don't question if you do know it properly or not. Well, maybe a little bit, but yeah, be confident because you've been hired because they've seen something in you and they think that you're good for the job, basically.
Nicely said. Very good. What do you think, Adele, in terms of advice that you might give to somebody starting their first job?
I definitely agree with the have confidence in your abilities. You've been chosen for a reason, and they want to see you blossom and grow, especially if you're in a good company. They want to nourish that talent and just be confident in what you're able to do. And for those who are about to start a job, I'd say don't be worried about if you're going in a different direction to your degree, because obviously I did game art and then didn't end up in game art, and that's been a bit of like a internal, am I messing up here? Am I not like doing what I'm meant to be doing? But I'm in a job that I really enjoy, and it like creatively fulfills me, and I learn lots of skills in university that have like shaped me into the person I am today, so it's all about that confidence. It all comes back to it, doesn't it?
I like these emergent themes that start to come, kind of threads that connect people. Now that's wonderful. So Freya, in terms of advice you'd give a Falmouth student who's just starting their first industry job, what do you think you would say to them?
Yeah, I'd say be open to like learning as much as you can. Like obviously if you're there to do like environment art or whatever, don't be afraid to be like, hey, I'm really interested in learning like more tech art stuff, because like Adele said, if you're at a company that really values you and wants to grow you as an employee and keep you on, they're probably going to be open to that. Like I know Dreams, we have a system where we'll like pay for you to do courses, and you can take training days to kind of learn new things, and just be open to learning new stuff. Don't let yourself get too boxed in at the start of your career, because you've got a long life ahead. You don't know where it's going to take you,
It sounds like the learning process is sort of continual. It kind of never ends. No, that's wonderful. And what do you think, Abby, in terms of advice you'd give somebody starting their first job?
I think there's always the temptation to be like, oh, this is my first job, I have to be like happy and be the yes man. But I think be confident in saying that something isn't working, like whether it's a work process or you think there's a bit of the game that you have an idea of how you can improve, say it. They want to know, they're paying you there for your ideas. Like you shouldn't feel like you shouldn't share those because you're new. So.
Absolutely. So there's value in kind of constructive criticism, even if it might come off as a bit negative at first. Yeah. No, that's really good. Okay, so we've got one more question, and then we'll move into kind of a Q&A phase. I think we might even have an extra handheld mic. Yeah, I see it out there. Wonderful. All right, so this will be our last question, and then kind of think about questions that you might want to ask out there in the audience. So this is a question about surprise. And so the question is, what was the biggest surprise or even shock you had transitioning from education to the workplace? So you're moving from kind of education to the workplace. What was surprising or even shocking to you, in terms of that movement? So Samson, you want to start us off?
Surprise is an interesting one. It was a strange transition because my job is entirely remote. So I went from, it was more, I guess there was a culture shock, there was a culture surprise a little bit. Went from being in the GA every day, working in person, which don't take for granted, is great. And then went back home and I was working remote and yeah, I mean, not quite a surprise, but it was something that I had to get used to was working from home entirely, creating direct lines of communication. It's very easy to get lost or be incognito a bit when it's online and you're not always like in the same room as each other. So that was potentially something that took a while to get used to, but I really enjoy it now that I'm in it.
No, that's fascinating. And how do you keep from staying incognito or kind of going under the radar? What are your communication strategies?
So we have we do weekly stand-ups at the company. So we have touch points every Monday morning. We all kind of come together. We started just by having a coffee, having a chat, and then we go into our work-based stuff, which is a nice way of doing it. Obviously, that's only once a week. So on top of that, you're always scheduling meetings. If there's something you need from someone, you just got to be you just very quickly learn to poke them and be like, can we organize a meeting for tomorrow 10 a.m. or whatever. But aside from that, if we're just doing stuff which isn't necessarily meeting related, we're just working our own things. We also have a Discord server where we can just sit in a voice call and kind of replicate that, being together and working on stuff, and we have our cameras on and whatever. And I know it's a direct correlation with the more I'm doing stuff like that, where I'm in a space with these people, whether it's online or not, the more I feel connected to my co-workers and the company. And I think that's really important in working from home and online working, is to just not get in your own head and isolate yourself, because there is a wider team, even if it might be spread across the whole world. keep the connections with them.
I wonder if COVID might have helped to prepare us for that a little bit.
You know,
perhaps.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, the entirety of first year was pretty much online, so it wasn't like it was kind of brand new to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So Ben, biggest surprise or shock in that transition from uni to work?
I guess in a way, probably the difference in culture, but also weirdly similarity in culture. I feel like it's really different culture in the workplace because obviously I feel like when you're at uni, you kind of get used to the fact that everyone's kind of similar age.
Sure.
But in the workplace, like some people have families and some people have been in the industry for like 30 to 40 years.
Right.
And then there are other people who are only a few years ahead of you. And it's kind of like, I'd say the biggest surprise to me was like, oh yeah, everyone here has like completely different lives, and like catering to that is a lot more, I guess it's a lot more different to at university, where everyone's still living different lives at uni, but everyone's kind of focused around uni. I guess everyone at work is focused around work, but it's not the same for everyone.
Yeah.
And also the kind of like conversations that happen in the office are just very, very different. But at the same time, a lot of the feel of it can be really, really similar. Like I found that the GA really did set me up quite well for like what it's kind of like to be doing the game development part of being in an office, of just kind of like collaborating and talking about the game and having like just random chats about like what people think is best for this part or that part. But I was surprised at how engaged the company, the office was with how the community around on the game we're working on. Like I, as a student and as just a person who plays games, I always thought like, oh, they're never going to read like, you know, the people who make the game are never going to read this like random Reddit post that someone made. Sure. That's like a joke or something. No, they do. they see all of them. They like seek them out because they're curious what people think of it.
Wow.
So, yeah, I thought that was quite shocking.
Yeah, no, and some of the memes must be shocking too.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah, Adele, what was your biggest surprise or shock, do you think?
How nice everyone is.
Yeah.
I don't know, when I was at university, there was this sort of like idea that it was very competitive, which it is.
Sure.
But like, everyone's for themselves, you know, that kind of vibe. But the industry is full of lovely people, and your people in the Games Academy are lovely people as well. At Sumo Group, we have this sort of like saying, which is always assume positive intent, and everyone works to that as well. So it's the idea of everyone's working to the same idea, everyone wants to do well and wants others to do well and wants whatever they're trying to do well, you know. So that's just really helped foster this sense of community. Everyone's working to the same goals. They want it to succeed, you know, that kind of vibe. Another thing that shocked me was that my first job isn't going to be my forever job. And it's okay that if your first job in the industry isn't the best job as well, like things happen, and it's such a flexible and quick moving industry. So yeah, sort of being prepared to be flexible.
Yeah, kind of agility or nimbleness in career development.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, Freya, what was your biggest surprise or shock?
Yeah, I think sort of kind of adapting to kind of office culture was quite interesting, because obviously Falmouth is very good when it comes to like the dev stuff and like working in a team, but sort of like obviously when you're studying at university, it's like you get your attendance tracked, like you have to attend like these lectures at this time, whereas moving to like an office environment, it's sort of like if you need to miss this meeting, you just have to tell someone and like it'll probably be okay. Like they're not like tracking your attendance, like you're not gonna get like, you know, a bad grade if you don't like do a task by like the end of the week. Like, you know, there isn't kind of strict deadlines in the sense of like if you think something's going to take a week longer, tell your supervisor and they'll be like, yeah, that's like okay, or like I can help you with that. Just kind of getting out of a more rigorous academic structure to like an office environment where the rules are just like a little bit different.
Wonderful. So more flexibility there then. No, that's great. Abby, biggest surprise or shock?
I think the biggest surprise for me was actually seeing how many different roles are a part of releasing a game. Programmers, designers, artists, and animators and writers, that's about it. But then when you actually get there, you've got your marketing analysts, and your marketing 3D artists, and your producers, and your designers. And even then, within those sort of roles of programming and artists, you've got people who really love rigging, and you've got people who love vehicles, and they could just do really good wheels. And even in my role, you have people who love more of the design side of it, doing AUX flows and that kind of thing, and you have more visual artists. I think people sort of, at the beginning, it's good to have a broader idea of what you want to do, but as you sort of go on, you can really focus in on what you want to do and really hone in those skills, which is really nice.
Wonderful. So a greater kind of range of skills, but also more opportunities to specialize potentially. No, wonderful. All right, well, we've got about 12 minutes and time for some Q&A, which I think is a wonderful opportunity. So the way we'll do it is if you have a question out there in the audience for our good panel of alumni, if you just raise your hand, then this gentleman in the back will bring a microphone over and you can ask your question, and then we'll see if people want to kind of chip in and have answers to it. So, think about questions you would really, things that you would really like an answer to, and see if we have some hands out there. What would you like to have? Yeah, here we've got a gentleman up here in a green sweater.
So obviously you've talked about how there's a whole range of teams, and especially in the releasing of the game, there's all these different roles that you've never heard of. Like, they're quite T-shaped, clearly, if they're really good at rigging or they love making wheels or whatever. But my point being, like, we're all taught to be T-shaped or pie-shaped or whatever it is. And how would you say that has helped you to get to where you are? And do you think you imagine yourself where you are at uni or when you were graduating? Or do you think that vision of yourself has changed?
I think especially with my company working on live mobile games, you'll have different features come up sort of now and then, so the team kind of has to adapt, so people move teams and sort of move on to what they do best. I think being T-shaped is really good because it sort of gives everyone an idea of adjustability, but then having those specialisms, if there's an opportunity that comes up that you really love to do, or if someone needs advice on something, you're like the go-to person. I think at uni, I sort of had this idea in my head where you have one person who sort of is really good at all of it on one team, and you have to be good at all of it all at once, and you have to do it all at once. But in reality, it's a lot of sort of trading in skills. So, yeah. So sometimes you're leaning on some of your other teammates' T-shaped skills, and sometimes they're leaning on yours.
I'd also say, like, with T-shaped in like a professional context, whereas being T-shaped in a student context, it might mean that you're like dipping into a few different things and doing different things. In a professional context, it can often just be as useful that it means you can talk the lingo of the other disciplines, because you've got that sort of horizontal, you've obviously got the downward trajectory of what you're actually good at and what you're hired for, but because you can talk, communicate, it just removes those barriers of communication. You can talk to animators, you can talk to artists. It's just as much about the communication as well, I'd say, in terms of how it can help.
Wonderful.
So if you like find a bug in the game, it's so valuable to know who to send it to. I feel like that's actually surprisingly quite a big issue, is bugs getting thrown around to different departments because no one's sure who caused it.
Sure.
So the more T-shaped you are, I guess the more likely you are to know who actually needs to fix that.
Wonderful.
To build on the idea of like being T-shaped, it comes into play a lot in development. So with Sumo Group, we have a lot of studios underneath that like family of sorts, maybe like 18, I want to say, roughly. And often people are like chipping in to different studios' projects to help them out, because a lot of it's like co-dev. So having that adaptability to go from one project to another and use your skill sets is really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think like you said, being able to talk the lingo is really useful. Like, the whole reason I have the job that I do now is because I came from a game dev background. Like, it really like stood out to my interviewers because I could like talk that lingo. But because, again, I like made every effort to be T-shaped, I also knew the like core stuff for my job. So yeah, it's really important to like not box yourself in at uni, like, because you never know what skills you're going to need to use when you get into the big, scary real world.
Very well said.
And once you do get into that big, scary world, there is room to specialise. Like you were saying earlier, Abby, there's a lot of roles that are like, you wouldn't expect them to exist. Like someone I used to work with was like a game capture artist. Their job is to literally just go into the game and capture pretty pictures and videos and use them for trailers or promotional materials. That's like a thing you'd never hear of, you know, but like if you apply it to an academy setting, when you're marketing your games in the expo, that's a really useful skill to have to get people to play the game, you know? So, yeah, it all feeds in.
Sounds like a great job. I'd love to be a game capture artist. That's really good. I think we've probably got time for at least one more question. Do we have a hand out there? Something, burning question you would like to ask our alumnus about what it's like to work in industry or how to get ready for industry or anything like that? Really liked that question about being T-shaped. Oh yeah, Padmini, all right, here we go. Here comes the microphone.
How long did it take you to get a job, and where did you look for jobs, and which portal or source was able to help you land a job?
I can start?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, I think it was maybe 6 months, I want to say. So I was surprised, very quick turnaround. But because the job wasn't in game art, it took me quite a bit of like searching to understand what I wanted to do. And luckily I had experience in university of like doing club activities, you know, extracurricular kind of stuff. So I was in the K-pop society and I was running their social media. So that fed into what I'm doing today. Yeah, so it took me around 6 months. I found the job through Discords. So there comes again the networking aspect. I found it through Discord, and it was a role for people trying to get into the industry. I had to be on universal credit to apply for the role. So I went on universal credit because I was eligible, and I was able to get the role. Yeah, and it kind of went from there.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love that networking on Discords. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say it took me pretty much exactly a year after I finished uni to get my job, and I'd say I was pretty fortunate to get it. And the way I found out about it, I mean, the main way I searched for jobs is I just like made a list of all of the companies that I wanted to apply to, and like every couple of weeks I would just go through all of their websites and check their job listings to see if there was any like junior designer roles or QA or something I could apply for. And also I heard a lot of the jobs I heard about were from people I knew at university who had jobs. Like I'm pretty sure I was thinking about applying for the job that I got, and then I came to the expo last year and spoke to Cassie Cornish. I don't know if you might know her, and she said like, oh, I got a job, you should apply for the one that they've got now. And I was like, okay, and then I applied for it and I got it, and I was working with her like a month later. So that's pretty cool. I would say one thing that definitely helped me get my job was looking at Intergames. If you've heard of them, they're really, really helpful. They run lots of courses, and I'm pretty sure I actually passed my interview because I was doing an Intergames course when I got my interview, and they said, oh, can you open Engine and show us what you can do? And I was already working on something that was new, and they were just looking at it, and they're like, oh, that's cool. So,
that was who I got my first job with, through the universal credit thing. So that's really small worlds.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wonderful. Yeah, we just had a student, actually several students win Intergames competition, 50 Intergames it was called.
Yes, I was on the Intergames 50 as well in my year. That really helped.
Whoa, interesting. Okay, very powerful. Yeah, no, really interesting. It's sort of a personal question, but I mean, how long did it take you, Samson?
Yeah, it it was a funny one. I don't imagine it was like normal trajectory, but I think it might have been a year to the day today that I got the job, because it was like at Expo last year.
Yeah.
I had an interview. It wasn't like to do with the Expo, but I had an online interview with Studio, and they offered me the job, which was great. But so like from an outside perspective, it's like, wow, like you get a job straight after finishing uni. But I'd been applying for at least like 6-7 months before that, because I was just really set on like I want a job to sort of come back to when I move home. So I lost count of how many studios I applied for, and I know that can be like pretty dejecting when it's like application after application, you don't hear back from them. But yeah, so then it was after about 6 months that I finally interviewed for somewhere that was a good fit. And yeah, basically the day that I got the interview was also the day that they hired me. So I went in 2 days from like not having a job, not thinking I was going to have a job, to having a job. So it can like happen really quickly if the stars align. There is definitely like, I hate to say it, but there is an element of luck involved. But just keep going, like, so don't stop applying. Like literally what Ben was saying, I think I had just like spreadsheets of different UK-based game studios, and I was just like, that's a senior role, I'm not going to get it, I'm going to apply for it. Just applying for all of them. Make sure all your links work on your CVs, because my inbox was full. I'm terrible at replying to emails. I think I had like 10,000 unread emails or something. So on my CV, I actually had my Twitter handle. So I had actually received an email from them about a week earlier, and it bounced back and they didn't get a response. So he found me on Twitter and messaged me on Twitter and was like, hey, is everything okay? Like, are you okay to like go in for an interview? And I was like, oh yeah, amazing. So make sure your inbox isn't full, but also make sure all of your links work so that people can reach out to you like in all the right streams.
Power of that professional website, really important. No, that's great. Well, we've got about 1 minute and 30 seconds left, but I think this is an important number. So anybody else willing to share how long it was before they got their first job?
So it took me about a year of applying. So when I graduated, I tried to start an indie games team first, and so I did that for like a year, and then a year later I began applying for games. And yeah, it took me about a year. I was on all the sites like Indeed, LinkedIn, Games Jobs Direct. Like they have a service where like I think it's every week they send like an email out of like the hot upcoming roles. So, and it like divides into sections. I was just like scrolling through all of them. Funnily enough, I applied to a role at Endreams before getting my new role, and I didn't get it, but then as soon as that rejection got sent through, I saw that they had a new role on the site, which is the role I have now. And so in my response to the rejection email, I was like, oh, that's so sad to hear. Like, I really wanted your job, but I'm going to apply to this new one. And I got to like skip a bunch of the like pre-interview stuff as well, because they already knew me and there was already that connection there. And yeah, I got the job I have now. So yeah, I think kind of keeping up like connections and like, not letting leads die is really important as well.
Wonderful. Well, we are exactly at time right now. So first of all, let's give a round of applause for our excellent panelists. And I'm sure they will continue to be around at Expo, so you could probably chat to them, and talk to them if you have further questions and everything. So anyway, thank you so much for being here, and we'll talk to you later.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 3 o'clock panel today. We're going to talk about working in the industry, and I'm joined by some great people to actually help explain how they're working in the industry. So I'll ask them, first of all, to start by introducing themselves and talking a little about what they're working now and how they got there. So if you'd like to start, Alex.
Sure. My name's Alex Bellows. I am an expert environment artist at That's No Moon. Before That's No Moon, I was at Respawn as a senior, shipping Jedi Survivor. I've been in the industry for roughly 12 years, but it hasn't all been AAA. I've come through a kind of strange route, doing mobile, indie, iGaming, but now residing in AAA.
I'm John Joe Hemmons. I'm a senior environment artist at That's No Moon. I graduated from Falmouth University in 2019, so I'm alumni. Since then, I've worked at Antimatter Games, Creative Assembly, and Rocksteady. But yeah, now I get to work with this guy.
My name is Bart. I'm working at 1010 Games as a mid-level animator. Similar to John Joe, I graduated Falmouth not too long ago, I think 1 year after you. And yeah, that's about it. It's my first industry job, so very excited to see what comes soon.
I'm Matt Brett. I'm a character artist at 1010 Games. I've been in the industry at the same time as Bart, roughly like around 3-ish years now. 1010 Games is my first game studio, and I'm alumni from Falmouth as well.
How you doing? I'm Clifford Orkale. I am currently working as a junior producer at Yogscast Games. Before that, I was a usability researcher of Team 17, and I've been in the industry just coming up on 2 years now.
Hi, I'm Kieran Goodson. I'm a senior environment artist at the Chinese Room, currently on Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. Before that, I worked for 3 years on Sniper Elite 5 over at Rebellion in Oxford, graduating from Coventry University in 2019. So coming up to my 5 years anniversary in the industry.
Thank you very much. So welcome all, and I've got a few questions that I've been given to sort of ask, and we'll probably branch off on those. But I'll start off by asking Alex, first of all, why do you enjoy working in the industry? It's probably a good start, because obviously people are setting out and they want to know why they should bother, I think.
It's bold of you to assume I enjoy it. It's honestly, like, it sounds like a cliche, but it's being able to like really push yourself, and like it isn't easy. I think that's the one thing I would say. It's not easy. It's really stressful most of the time, and you're always trying to put out a fire or solve a problem. And if you enjoy doing that, if you actually enjoy problem solving and pushing yourself, it's amazing. You'll love it. But it is it's non-stop. Like I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just you'll solve one problem and then you'll get a new JIRA come through, which is like, well, you got a new problem to solve. And it's like, great, that's the one I'll work on. And seeing the product at the end, like all these annoying little tasks you didn't want to do, come together to make a great game is like a very rare experience you get. Yeah, it's really what I like about it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good thing.
So for me, I kind of just always enjoyed being creative, and I couldn't really see myself working like a different job, so I had to just go into games. And also, like similar to Ginger, I just really enjoyed playing games throughout my whole life, and like being able to work on something that's going to give other people the similar experience, like it's just amazing. And also just it's really cool that the games industry is a fairly social workplace as well, because you have to chat with people. And that's something really nice, because you'll go ask about like, oh, what do we need to do for this animation, like what's the design, then you also start chatting about random stuff. So that's like, it doesn't really feel like work even, especially if you enjoy doing like your thing. So yeah, it's great.
I mean, I worked in the industry a long time ago, and it's like finding your own tribe. It's really nice that people that you work with. So I know exactly what you mean by that. So Matt, how about you?
Well, the only thing I really enjoyed doing when I was young was drawing, and then as I got older and I kind of did more with technology, that branched out into sculpting and modelling through college, and I just kind of took it up from there. And yeah, I just enjoy making characters. It's the main thing I do, and the fact that the industry is so social, and like there's all these things that we get to go to, and these events, and you know, just how social the workplace is, as Bart said before. It's just overall super enjoyable for me.
I think it's because I don't think there's anything else I could ever work on I could care about as much. I grew up playing games, and it's always been like, it's something I just fell in love with. I cut my teeth in IT, and I was like, that's fine, it's still computers, I still enjoy it. But there's never going to be anything that will match the same level of like joy in my heart as like, you know, shipping a good product, you know, seeing people's reviews being like, you know, I love this game, or, you know, this game is so addictive, I can't put it down. You know, it's like, this game's amazing, and it's just that surge of positive emotion and seeing something you've worked on like really resonate with people. I don't think any other, at least for me, any other industry could ever match that, you know, in a professional context. I think it could only be got within games.
It's that release of an object, isn't it? And you see what other people think, which is your driving force. Yeah. And Kieran?
For me, I mean, I came close to pursuing film and editing instead, but I chose games because they shaped me growing up. managed to escape some horrible social situations by playing games. And I think that what makes games so interesting and so exciting to be in is because we have that sort of fourth dimension of time over the experience, whereby, yes, you have films which are, flat screen 2D, and yes, your perception of that changes over a character arc and over a story, but it's the gaming element and the interactivity of that product that actually is exciting to be a part of, because you as an audience member, you as a player, have agency over certain stories, and that's a dimension that is exclusively inherent to games. It's not something that films or radio or like even books can even offer you. So that's what I enjoy.
That's cool. It's a good answer. I think it is very intimate, unlike film and TV. Is that you're working on something that different people interpret in different ways. And it's that sort of almost touching the people who play your game.
Experience.
It's almost tactile, which is quite nice. Thank you. Yeah. So that's the second question, because a few people have touched on it already. It's not always easy going. It's not always very smooth between what you actually sort of work on and what actually the final product is and how it's received. So similar thing, but same sort of thing. But what challenges have you actually faced while you've been working on a game? And that might involve working from home or working actually within the studio, or how well things have been received as well. That would be interesting to know.
I think one thing which is like, especially for creators, is it's an industry which is different to others for the sake of, well, any creative industry really. Like, it's pure passion, and to the detriment of the artist, because you are always going to want to make something better.
Yeah.
Like, I had an old art director and he said it stuck with me. It's like, your art's never finished. You can always polish it. You can always make it bigger. You can always make it better. And the hardest thing has been, as an artist, especially as you like progress and you get more and more responsibility, you can't let your own artistic ego get in the way of the product. Like, you have to say stop at some point. And it's so hard when you're so passionate about the product you're making that you want to take it further, you want to make it better, but a game has to ship, and the game, we can't overscope and all these sorts of things. And it's really hard to park your own ego or just accept, right, this is a product, we're making a game. We're not making, it's not your product, it's not your thing. You're making it for someone else, and you have to stop at some point and allow it to just be what it is. And when you're constantly inspired by this industry, like, if anyone has played like the Last of Us games, like you're looking, it's like, I want to make that. But every studio is different. Every studio has different timelines and different budgets and different team sizes. And so as an artist, being having to say, all right, we're not that, we're not this, because of all these things outside of my control, is really hard to swallow sometimes. It's a really hard thing to like not let put you down or get you down. I mean, that's probably the thing, like, throughout my entire career I've always dealt with, and I think probably everyone always has. And you always will, because art's never finished. Like, you always carry it on. I think that's something for me that I struggle with a lot.
That's another astute observation. How do you deal with it now? Do you have any particular
producer tell me to
tricks?
stop.
Deadlines.
Yeah.
Deadlines.
Deadlines, yeah. There's only so much you can do at any time. Okay. Bartos.
So honestly, because I've been in the industry for not a long time yet, it's just coming up on 3 years, and it's been the same company we just started as I joined. It's been pretty much a smooth sailing for me, really.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest challenge for me is just waking up. Just not the fun of the early mornings. But yeah, other than that, maybe like sometimes you get this like super crazy idea you think will make the game really great. You go to design and they're just like, we thought about that, but no. And you're just like, damn it, I thought I had something. But that's not really a challenge, more of like, just don't feel good. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much. And Matt.
Well, I'm in a similar position to Bart, where like the company's a very recently made company. Like it was made as we were finishing uni. I think I was the first junior to join, and it was a really small team. And they had, all the devs were seniors from a different studio, so they kind of had the idea of how a studio works and all that. So throughout the like almost 3 years that I've been there, it's been mega smooth sailing. And the nature of my job, it's like the assets that I make, they don't take very long to make. So I don't get like mega attached to them, like, oh, I've made like this person as a Funko Pop and they're not in the game anymore, I'm not going to be heartbroken over it. But yeah, I'd say the same thing. It's just like keeping a consistent, work schedule and
not getting too attached to the work that you do. So
yeah. It's been like mega smooth for me. I've not really faced any massive issue throughout the.
And long may it continue that way.
Yeah, long may it continue. It's a good time.
Clifford.
I feel like I'm going to like change the dynamic here of like who's new and is going to like mention a real not that getting up in the morning isn't a real problem. We all face that one. For me, it is accepting your limitations, especially when you're new. It can be really, really tough because depending on how you enter a team, what teams you're entering, you may not have like other juniors alongside with you, and you could end up comparing yourself to a lead, and you'll make mistakes, and you're like, I screwed that up. That's on me, and you can end up being really regretful and mournful of a game. You just have to learn to like it's part of a learning process. Something my boss told me is when he worked as a printer. The first time he did the guillotine wrong and destroyed a sheet, he's like, you'll never make that mistake again. It has to happen. The best thing you can do is learn from your mistakes, throw your hands up and say, yeah, I was responsible for that. I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to grow from it. People expect you to make mistakes, especially when you're new. Your own head is your worst enemy on that front. You're your own worst critic. Of like, everyone's going to think I'm an idiot or I'm a moron. It's like, I screwed this up. Most people on your team won't notice or they won't care. They'll just be like, all right, let's go fix it and get it done. No one I've found in this industry is ever really out to get you. Most people really just want to prop each other up because we do difficult work. No one goes into the job being like, trying to put anyone down, I think.
Yeah, good advice. And Kieran?
Yeah, I mean, to leapfrog off of that, communication is always just such a core skill that nobody seems to talk about because there's often so much focus on the technical aspects of how a game gets put together. But then you realise how vital producers are and leads and directors, and they're trying to communicate down a vision to a core team. If everyone is on a different page, then you end up with a product that looks nothing like what it was originally intended, which may be dissatisfying to an audience who had certain expectations, which again, if you're working under a big publisher, as a developer, you don't have any control over the marketing campaign that goes out. You don't get to say which screenshots get put out or in which order they get put out. So it's almost as if the game gets made in 3 stages. It gets made in pre-production, on the script, in planning, on Miro boards, however the directors envision the game. Then you've got the core production of that title, and then actually how that's being marketed and all the post-production stuff. 3 different versions of a game, they're not necessarily aligned, and communication actually helps to streamline that process and tie a core thread through each one of those things. And you will end up making a different game than the one you set out to do, but it's just down to communication. And it's just such a difficult skill to get right, because you might have a junior or someone who comes on board at a lower level in the hierarchy that's an expert communicator, but they don't have the responsibility of communicating anything. And as you move up the hierarchies, you take on more responsibility, you will learn how much more important communication might be over some of those technical skills. And actually, as you do become a lead or a director, you have to delegate a lot of your original tasks in the first place. So you'll have to spend more time developing your communication skills, your leadership skills, hosting panels, talking to people. And again, those are skills that you can be constantly building throughout your career, which is why an expo day like this today is beneficial for everybody involved, because you'll learn how to do it, and it gets easier with time, but it's still a tricky one to manage, even 10, 20, 30 years into a career.
It's a very astute observation, especially when team sizes the way they are. You don't get any one person with their entire vision carried through.
Especially in a pre-pandemic world where, some of these smaller indie teams as well would have been 10, 20, 30 people in the same room. You could spin around and talk to the programmer.
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to do nowadays. You've got teams. And I feel like that's a bit of a scapegoat that studios tend to put out, which is, this project was a failure because we had the pandemic and everybody had to switch on to Teams and virtual communication platforms, but ultimately as an individual it's you that has to take responsibility. And if there's been a miscommunication, like you were saying, you have to put your hands up and say, look, I slipped up there, and this is how I'm going to make it right in this situation, and this is how we should do things moving forward. It's just not fair to blame, communication issues on one individual. It's usually a network of people who have just missed each other in some degree. And again, it's the director's responsibility to make sure that everything is falling in line, but it's also the leads and the people managers that should be constantly nudging the direction back into the way it should go.
Well observed, yeah, that's good. Thank you. I'll ask another question of everybody, because I'm interested to know if there's much scope still for freelance or beginning freelance in order to worm your way into a particular company or get some experience. So if we start over here again with Alex, what advice would you give for trying to get involved with freelance? How to approach it, or not to bother, or whatever it actually, whatever the advice actually might be.
So I guess one distinction I make is like between contracts and freelance. You get like short-term contracts, like 6 months with a studio, and that's one form. That's like kind of gig culture where you're like going 6 months here, 12 months there, 10 months here. I actually got my original foot in the door into AAA was through freelance as an outsourced artist for Decagon, and there's a lot of work there. Like, look, outsourced studios tend to have a high turnaround. Most people want to work in a AAA studio. So most of the outsourced vendors, you tend to get artists who come in, there's certain artists who rise to the top and they move on to the next studio and actually get in. There's no shortage of needing outsourced artists. So in terms of like freelance, if you're looking to get in AAA, like outsource is a great start point because you get to actually work on some big titles. You get to experience the quality that's expected without being overwhelmed, because when you get into the studio, you start to get into really deep pipelines and jumping through hoops to make certain things, whereas outsource tends to be assets which are a little bit more straightforward. There's a little bit more like, structure to it, and it's a little bit more like, I guess, entry friendly. So I guess you've got to make a choice of what you want to do. Do you want to do the gig culture, which is I did for a little bit, doing contract to contract? Or do you want to do like full freelance where you're doing probably like, I was doing outsourcing, I was working for ArtStation, I was working for Counterplay, and you're juggling a lot more plates when you're doing the sort of freelance culture. So I guess that's what the distinction I make for you, everyone that's thinking about it, is which one do you want to do? And it's not for, I will say it's not for everyone. It is incredibly chaotic. Ours are not yours. Like, the amount of times I've had one of my vendors say, we need this change and we need it now, and I'm like, eat my dinner, and it's like, okay, well, we'll hop back on the PC and fix that, because it's my responsibility. If I don't, I just won't get more hours again. There is definitely that component of it, and that's not for everybody. I think it's definitely, I would never turn my nose up to the freelance. Like I said, it got me my foot in the door, and there's always work there. I feel like it'd be a long time before I think freelance work disappears.
What would you look for specifically in a freelancer's sort of output to actually interest you?
Good hourly rates. What am I looking for? I guess being like longevity from artists. Like, there's some outsourced studios out there who have, like Sierra Division, for example. There's like great artists there. It isn't juniors and students. There's like really big names in the industry just choosing to work there. That's a huge green flag, because you go, oh, you choose to work there rather than artists who have the capacity to work at Naughty Dog, and they've chose to work at this company. You go, okay, there's something here. So I think if you know the names there of like there's reputable artists at that studio, it's a huge green flag. And then it flips out of that, if you go there and there's not a single name you know, and you don't know the founder and you don't know anybody, probably a little bit of a red flag. They'll probably be, we work with Epic, we work with these people, but there's no reputable names. There's a little bit of like, okay, I should be a little bit concerned here. Okay. So that's what I kind of look for.
Thanks very much. And John Joe?
My experience with freelance has been probably different to most. I've freelanced with a few different companies, NVIDIA, Sentient Art, and Sierra Division, all of which was during me having full-time jobs. So it was stuff that I did in my own time after my work hours. It's tough to do, and most of it, though, came to me through my existing body of work. It's not stuff I applied for. It was through contacts that recommended me. It all kind of materialized through my network that pre-existed in the industry. So I've not ever looked for it. It's just kind of come my way. I think it's something that you kind of need specialisms for. I don't think you can be a good generalist. Well, I think there may be work in freelance for generalists, but at least from my perspective, what I've seen is that it really tends to be specialists who get headhunted for those roles. So I spent a long time honing my prop skills, which is why I got asked by NVIDIA to help them with their props. I had done those props gigs, so that kind of got me on to do vehicles for another thing, and it just kind of snowballs.
Mm-hmm.
The more people that you work with, the more reputable you look, and then the more freelance gigs come in. But Bellows makes a good point in that, hourly rate is really important because I think in freelance you're not beholden to like contracts like you are. Like there are less laws around it. It can be rife with abuse. I think there have been some gigs that I've looked at and I think just weren't worth the money. Like $18 an hour for asset creation just is. It's not that that's a bad wage for some people, but compared to what a full-time gig might offer, it's really not great. Especially considering you have to do your own taxes, you don't get the benefits of full-time employment. I think freelance is good, you just need to be quite specialized to get the most out of it, I think.
That's a good observation, thank you. And Bartos?
Well, in my case, I've not really had experience with freelance at all. Before I started in the industry, right after uni, I was experimenting with it, but from my experience, it was a bit tough because, first of all, I couldn't find actually any like freelance opportunities. And once someone actually reached out to me, they offered like terrible wage for it, which is basically like a week's worth of wage for a month's work. So that's basically my experience. I think working in industry, like at a set company as an animator, is probably easier because you get used to the rigs, to the rigging style of the technical animators, etc. And then you kind of just do your job much faster and much more efficiently. Whereas, possibly as an animator, you maybe are expected to rig the characters yourself. In freelance, I'm not sure how it goes, but that's basically all.
Well, that's they're just trying to pay the minimum wage, and you want to avoid.
I think it was below minimum wage.
Going down that route, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Man.
My experience, I was coming out of the first year of uni, and I was headhunted by Southern GFX in Frodsham. That's kind of like a freelance / outsource company. But it was a really fun time. I mean, at that age, I wasn't worried about money or anything. Like I was living with my parents, so those kind of thoughts weren't going into my mind. I was more just enticed by the fact that I was working on something different than my boss, who was sat next to me, working on something different than the guy who sat behind me. I was doing a crane for a military compound, and he was making the faces for a stop motion animation. But outside of that, like not a lot of thoughts were going through my mind when that was happening. I was really just focused on finishing uni and getting through education. But it was nice to have money. It was nice to see all the cool things that I signed an NDA for that I can't really talk about. That's really my thoughts on it. I don't have a lot of experience with it.
Clifford, how about you?
So I have my experience coming the other way, actually, as a producer, having to deal with freelancers. Again, coming back to that hourly rate point, just saying, joking aside, if I can give advice to people looking to be freelancers, if someone has reached out to you with like a brief or like, hey, can you maybe provide me a sample or whatever, I know in my personal experience, I've reached out to friends and they've been like, oh, I don't really have time for that. And it's like, I get that. Your time is valuable. I'm not asking for your work to be given away for free. But if I don't have something to show, I can't push you forward as like a candidate to give you work. You need to be proactive about chasing up your responsibilities and having something to demonstrate, meeting your briefs, saying, am I maybe competitive with other people I'm up against without also selling yourself short. The biggest one I can push for is like be proactive. There's so many times I've reached out to people like, hey, I remember you from university, you did really good work for, either audio or, 2D assets or whatever. I need that for a current game. Can you get me something? And they're like, yeah, I'll get that back to you. And then it just didn't happen in time. Weeks would go by and it's like, well, we've already got another freelancer. And, I can't really float your name again without big questions being asked of like, well, didn't we ask that person before? Why would we go to them again and not get anything? So there's definitely an element of it's very much your personal responsibility, for better or for worse. So I know it's not going to suit everyone, but for those that are considering it, always remember that it's you are your own boss, and that means whenever things are shipped and getting done on time.
Okay, that's an interesting angle on it, I've got to say. And Kieran?
Yeah, I mean, I've not had any formal freelance experience, but I've done some loose stuff in the background with ArtStation for about 6 months, alongside a full-time job. And it's hard work to finish your day and then start your second day at work. But I think to take it on full-time, especially in the current climate that the industry is in at the moment, you just have to be exceptionally organised and proactive, like you were saying. You can't hide underneath a studio name or even necessarily background experience. It will be, you are only as good as your last thing that you did. And especially if you're freelancing, your reputation is going to matter the most. And in order to get and secure further work as a freelancer, you're going to have to maintain those relationships moving forward. It's not just a case of slipping into that work and then getting the next thing, because there's no guarantee that there's going to be a constant stream of clients or income in that respect. Again, I think I recommend everyone gets involved with that sort of thing, but just know that it's a different mindset, and there are kind of, if you value the security and predictability of a full-time job, then by all means don't go and freelance, because that can be a very chaotic world to be involved in if you're not ready or prepared for that way.
Okay, thank you. Good observations, and I'll expand a little bit on that. Not just the freelance work, but it'd be nice to think you would join a company and have a forever job that you would actually sort of have. But we all know at some point you're going to want to move on at some point. And so how do you equate that with your personal development? How do you equate that with when you decide it's time to move on? You know, what are you looking for? Perhaps you don't want to say it, but what are you looking for in your next stage of your career? What would compel you to move on?
I think, unfortunately, this kills me to say, I had a conversation with a colleague about this, which is, I think a skill set which game developers need is to be able to read the room and see the writing on the wall of, oh, okay, that's gone wrong, that person left, this is going wrong, this might be somewhere I want to leave and I don't want to be around. I've done jobs in the past where I've been there for 6 months and realised I made a bad choice and I've decided to leave pretty quickly. You're not beholden to like stick by your bad decisions. Like, we all make bad choices sometimes. And I think being honest with yourself to go, oh, I chose to come to this place, or I'm at this place which I care deeply about, and I'm seeing things go wrong which I think are wrong. And there's certain people you'll meet in the studios who are kind of like the pillars. They're not higher ups, not leadership, just artists who are workhorses. They do their job, they're quiet, or they're good positive energy, and suddenly you notice that person's the one complaining, and it's the sort of the alarm bell. Well, you never complain. Why? Oh, okay, something's actually wrong here. Like, this person's worried, I should be worried. So I think this skill set, which is very important to learn, is reading the room and just understanding, oh, these are markers for something that's potentially not good right now.
Right.
I know that's driven a lot of my career, like seeing, for example, like, there's big colleagues at past studios who are incredible. They were promised promotions and they're great and they literally carry productions, and then the game ships and it's like, oh, sorry, you can't have your promotion. And that's, for me, I'm like, well, I know that the whole company knows this person carried a team, and they've not been rewarded, and then the other person doesn't get rewarded, and then this, and you're like, oh, okay, something's amiss here. I maybe should look elsewhere. And I've been very lucky because I've made relatively smart choices when I've noticed that, and I feel that's why I've been relatively successful, is because I've been able to dodge bullets. That's it's not a nice thing to have to talk about, but I think that's a very important skill set.
I've got to hurry everybody now because we're running very short time, so we can keep it to about 30 seconds or so. John Joe, same thing, but concise.
Yeah.
Right.
There's so many reasons. You want a promotion and the company that you're working with doesn't have the space for it, or they refuse to give it to you. You're not happy with where the project's heading. You're maybe not enjoying the culture fit of the team. You want to try something new. You thought it'd be better than the job's turned out to be, or an amazing opportunity has appeared that you just can't say no to with people that you really want to work with.
All good choices. Arthurs.
I mean, similar to Janjo, it's all about like, there's a ton of different factors, right? There's, you know, the money, the ambition, like you might just get bored of the project, you might want the promotion, etc. So I don't think there's much else to add to this.
No, I get there's a pattern for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's good. Matt.
Yeah, sometimes it's just art style. Like, you know, say you're working on a realistic project, but you're a stylized artist. It's just about having the discipline to keep working on those stylized projects outside of work to keep those skills sharp. And yeah, just kind of working towards getting that job that you want, that you're comfortable in, that, you know, you may have just got a job to get your foot in the door, sorry. But yeah, just discipline outside of work to have that set time of day where you are working towards those goals.
Thank you. And Clifford?
Sometimes you just make a bad read on a position. I know whenever I joined usability at Team 17, I went into it with very different expectations of what would actually be done. There was nothing inherently wrong with the team fit or the culture, even the role. It just wasn't what I wanted or what I needed. And sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and say, I made a mistake, and you know, it isn't what I thought it was going to be and isn't what I need, and you just have to step away. And it's best to do that sometimes.
Thank you. And finally, Kieran, quickly.
Yeah, new skills, new people, new projects that you're more interested in working in. But sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and you have to be the change you want to see in the world, because ultimately, studio culture is the culmination of individuals at a company. And when those cultural pillars leave, that's when things start getting shaky.
Great answer. Thank you very much. So thank you all. Much appreciated. Some good answers to some interesting questions. And I was going to answer just one final thing is that remember to vote. The machines are available. You've got 15 minutes to vote. I think the cutoff is 4 o'clock. You'll use your wristbands to vote. So go away and vote. Thank you.
These awards were hotly contested. They are a recognition of really good work, but everyone who is here right now, who's been working at the Games Academy for the last however long you've been here for, well, first year, second year, third year, fourth year if you're a master's, if you're an IFY student, first year as well, you know, it's all the accumulation of that work. There's some amazing stuff out there, and it's been a real pleasure to be here and see all the amazing things. So give yourself all a round of applause first. Before we get launched into this, I want to do some thank yous. I really want to thank all the industry guests for giving up your time. Come to Cornwall if you're coming from up country. You know, it's been amazing to have you here, giving your time to do portfolio reviews, play the games, speak to our students. It's amazing to see you all here, and I just really want to extend my warmest thanks and the thanks from the Games Academy for being here. So thank you again. And just because of all the hard work, I really want to recognise the techs again for everything they've done. So another round of applause for the techs and Andy's team. This wouldn't be possible without them. Then we've got the staff as well. I want to acknowledge the staff. Been working hard over the years of the Games Academy to kind of make this all happen and come to this. So please thank the staff again. And just because I like to see you all clap hands, can you also just thank all the students again for making this what it is. Right. Okay, so before I get into the awards, the teams who do get announced as part of the awards, don't come up to the stage. Please stay behind at the end, preferably at the door at the end there to get your awards and things like that. Everyone else can go to the Stannery and enjoy the sort of celebratory drinks we're having after this. So we're going to go through, first of all, the sort of awards per year. So first of all, do we do drum rolls? Can someone just give me a little, yeah. First off, we have Best First Year Game. Goes to Scrap R by Mums on Buses. Woo! Excellent. Right, now drum roll again. Best second year game, Sugar Siege by Sweet Tooth Studios. Nice. Now we're getting into third year. Best third year game, Petal by This Way Up. Right. Now we're doing this again, everybody's feet and hands are getting sore as well. This is great. Best Masters game, Stretch and Squish by Plasma Institute. Right. Okay, so now we're getting to the awards that have been voted on by our industry colleagues. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that. Can we get an extra special drum roll for this one? Right, here we go, here we go. The industry award goes to Petal, This Way Up. Woo! Excellent. Excellent. Cool. I am not going to actually do drum rolls for this next slot. I'm just going to say them one at a time. The other thing we've got is staff awards. We've came up with a bunch of categories which have alliterations and all sorts. There was heavy debate upstairs, and I'm actually thinking that we might move our marking sessions to a semicircle round the whiteboard where we shout at each other. So the awards go to Bohemian Brilliance, Robros. Holistic Harmony, Space for Two. Aesthetic Ace goes to Petal. Fantastic Fiction, Wampus. Enterprising Excellence, Sugar Siege. And the final award, Bougie Booth, goes to Goblins Go Boom. And then finally, some honourable mentions because we were nearly at each other's throats, so we had to put these in. Failware, Kleptonauts, A Day in the Life, Scrapper, Bite and Smite, and Ludus Mortis. A round of applause for all those honourable mentions. So what we're going to now ask those to do who've got awards, you'll collect them now after the stream, just hang around. And I really want to thank you all again. So next up, if you're not getting an award or you're a guest, you can head up to the Stannery for some drinks. We're doing drinks reception from 5 to 10, is that correct, Andy? Yeah, networking event for 5 to 10. There's many options, alcoholic and non-alcoholic. There's some chill out spaces there as well, if anyone wants. And there's food as well. So again, I want to thank you for your time. And if you have an award, just hang out outside at the back. Okay, thank you very much and enjoy.